Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. My goodness, my goodness. Do I really have to repeat all that? Oh, man. I just gave, you can imagine, the most beautiful soliloquy on Pac 12 history. I went through the entire college football playoff scenarios involving every team. I went through the performance of Michael Penix, Bo Nix, the Heisman Trophy race. I ran down Pac 12 championships throughout history and the implications of this game. Oh, my goodness. Oh, technology is a sweet thing. Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Oh, Lord. This is not the night to ask me to go through all that, but we do appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much for that. We have left the link in the chat. We've also left the link in the description section of the video. We have also left the link on Twitter as well. And I'm going to somehow try to sum up all of that and deliver it again because I'm not letting that go. Here we go. So be ready for 20 minutes of a dissertation. Did we see a classic tonight? We saw a really good game. Did we see a classic? Not necessarily. We saw a really fine football team win a Pac 12 championship when it was not expected necessarily. Oregon, the much better football team on paper, on the field, to the eye test coming in. From the time that these two teams left the field in Seattle, Oregon was the better team. Any comp would show you that. Any eyeball test would back that up and confirm it. However, it didn't matter once they showed up in Vegas tonight. The Huskies, the team that limped into this Pac-12 championship game against those Oregon Ducks who rolled in the Pac-12 championship game. It was the team that limped, that got healthy at wide receiver. One of the best wide receiver rooms in college football is healthy for the first time in weeks, delivered. That secondary of Washington's, maybe not at full strength, but healthier than it's been in weeks, delivered on this night. Michael Penix, of course, not playing at his peak in recent weeks. He delivered. But more than anything, an Oregon football team that had looked to be the team that would be the stronger, the stouter up front on both sides of the ball, was outplayed by the Huskies. The Huskies were the better O-line team. They moved it for Dylan Johnson. They tore up the fourth quarter. They tore the heart out of the Oregon defense when it counted. They delivered and crushed the Ducks up front to deliver that 10-point lead with minutes to play. So Washington is your Pac-12 champion, just the 8th program in the college football playoff era to reach 2 playoffs. Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, now Washington. 2016's team fell to Alabama 24-7 behind Jake Browning at quarterback. This team much more explosive with Michael Penix at quarterback. Did he win the Heisman Trophy tonight? I don't know. That's not important. Historically, it's the end of a great football conference. Maybe not recently a great football conference, but historically a great, great football conference, and fitting that in the conference that has most likely produced the best array of quarterbacks throughout its history, I will stand on that one. The Pac-12 has produced the greatest quarterbacks in college football history. The two quarterbacks would highlight this game, showcase this game, and battle out on the field to the final minute for a Pac-12 championship in the Heisman Trophy. The implications? Well, I believe we've got a situation where, for as important as this game was, it didn't really have a enormous impact on the field. Texas, Bama, Florida State, they still have to take care of business. In what order? In what way? How dominant? This game could have certainly factored in if we knew what was going to happen in Atlanta tomorrow night. This looks to be a count 'em up: Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, Texas, and now the Pac-12 champion Washington field. So 6 teams fighting for 4 spots. Washington's got 1. We've got another 5 teams fighting for 3 spots. Ohio State very much on the perimeter of that. All right, you will not get my full soliloquy. I will stop there and take some calls. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And let's go to the phone lines. Ben's here.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
What's going on tonight, Ben?
Enjoyed that game. It was a pretty good one. Good Friday night championship game to watch.
Yeah, it was a good ball game.
It was good. I enjoyed it. How do you think? Okay, so my first thing I wanted to talk about, I have a lot to. That game was great. I could talk about the game, or I could talk about playoff. How this impacts the playoff situation. What sounds better to you right now?
It's your call, Ben.
So, did you expect? How did you expect? Did you expect the game to go the way it did?
I wasn't surprised, but I expected Oregon to win.
Yeah. Well, what about when in the first half? So first thing I want to say is I was watching the game and I'm hoping for Washington to win, and I kind of thought Oregon got a little hosed over. I think the refs missed some stuff. First, like there was like that I think they got a pretty good hold, called, not called. And I think a late hit on Bo Nix in the first quarter that's I think could have made a difference in that game. And I think it may be kind of made up later. But other than that, I mean, I thought the officiating was real good. I thought the game was called aggressive. It's different to watch the Pac-12. Like I go from this game, watching this was different than watching the Michigan, Ohio State game. Not night and day. It seemed it's just definitely different. The line doesn't seem as big on Oregon and the line seems like they. I don't know if you agree, but do you think that they have a smaller offensive line on both those teams?
Yes.
It seems like I'm looking at that and I'm like, I didn't notice it as much watching them earlier. But it was like the line small. So I'm wondering how that's going to match up how that's going to go in the playoffs. But the game, man, I enjoyed it. It was a fun one. I'm still a little pumped up because it was a fun one to watch.
It was a fun one. It was about what I expected in terms of not necessarily the final score or the winning team. I wasn't surprised, but I picked Oregon to win. But in terms of the scoring range, this was pretty much the first game. The first one was 37-34. And so pretty much in that range. And for as much as we think the Pac-12 are just these scoring fests, that's pretty much a mid-range college football game in scoring. It took these teams a long time typically to score. Mm-hmm. Washington was lining up for its first field goal to make it 3-0, and they chewed up 8 minutes of the first quarter.
Yeah. Washington chewed up some time tonight they chewed up some time on that clock, both at the beginning of the game and at the end. That their last scoring drive, they really chewed up. I thought it was deceptively. They deceptively chewed up the clock, and I was like, wow, I look at the clock and I'm like, wow, they did take a lot of time off on that drive, which is hats off to them because that was well played. What I thought about I think if either fan base watching that game had to just, it must have been a really exciting game for both fan bases. I seen, you're watching the, you could, see the anxiety on both fan bases in that game is kind of like us when we were watching the Michigan Ohio State game. There was like, you get within a 3-point game like that, and especially with Oregon's driving the way they were able to drive, you just didn't know. I mean, even with the last 2 minutes left, I'm like, is Washington gonna make a mistake and Oregon just gonna go down? Is Washington not gonna get the first down and then they're gonna let Oregon go down in a minute and score? It's just that's an exciting football.
Absolutely. It was a great game. What I always think about is I look at these guys and I think they pour their hearts and souls into football pretty much every day of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're working out, they're running, lifting weights. This is all off season. They're going to two-a-days. Well, maybe not these years going to two-a-days. I don't know what they've done with that. But anyway, summer workouts, August camp, spring practice, winter workouts. You win a national championship, and 3 days later, you're back on the football field in the indoor facility, getting ready for the next season. So, it is a job. And then I think, well, it comes down to a couple plays, and they're either going to be able to survive and advance and live for another day to try to grasp their dream, or it all ends and they either are off to graduation or the NFL, or they're off to, hey, we got to start working out and looking forward to next season.
Yeah, or they're off to their new career, whatever that is for some of these kids. For a lot of these kids, they're not, less than half of them are going to make it to the NFL. So when you're a senior, that's an emotional. I can see that. Yeah, another thing that's why it kind of gets me when people like, especially you have close games, they talk about how, well, this team wasn't good or that team, these are good caliber teams and they're losing by 3 points. Yet the narrative, will always be something like, for instance, I mean, even like with the Michigan TCU game, Michigan lost, just lost that game, and they could have been in the championship. And same thing with Oregon is a good team. They could have easily won that game and had a shot of being in the playoffs. And we'll see how they play out. See how Washington does in the playoffs, but it could just as well have been Oregon there. They're both really good teams, and I hate to see that narrative afterwards when they're both good programs.
Yeah, that is sports right there.
Yeah. So, all right. So I'm gonna real quick. I'll let some other caller get on. This is what my hopes for the rest of the weekend go. I want Michigan to win. I want Alabama to win. I want Florida State to win, and I want Texas to win. And I want to see what the playoff committee does with those wins.
Yeah, and I really don't know. That's probably
their worst case
chaos scenario right there. That is the worst chaos scenario.
I look at it like this. So how do you put Alabama in the playoffs when the only other undefeated team is Texas, and Texas beat Alabama? How do you put Georgia in when Georgia was beat by Alabama, who was also beat by Texas?
Yeah.
And it makes it a very interesting thing. And then you have like Ohio State sitting there with the one loss to who will be at that time the number one team, Michigan, if that all plays out, or probably anyways would be ranked the number one team. And then you have their loss, that be their only loss. That's just a nightmare scenario for the college football playoffs. So that's what I'm hoping for, and I'll leave it at that, and I'll let you get another caller on here tonight.
Okay, Ben, appreciate it, man.
And hey, just one more thing I want to shout out. I want to shout out to Oregon, Ben, sorry for the loss today, man. It's the way it is. If he's listening, man, it still is a good game, and you had a great season. All right, catch you later, Mark.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, it's finality. It reminds me of when John Madden would talk about that. He would say it in such a way that I think it really hit home with a lot of people when he would talk about the finality of going through the entire off season, working toward a goal, the entire regular season, and of course, this is in the NFL, but same concept. And then, boom, it can be a game in which you get into it, and within 3 or 4 series, you're out of it because it's 21-0, 28-0. And then you've got that slow grind of 3 hours of really knowing the inevitable and having it sink in, or you've got that sudden boom, last second field goal, last second touchdown, and your hopes and dreams are dashed just suddenly, and how that hits. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm good. What's going on?
Oh, pretty good game. Well, I'm actually kind of interested about the room now because apparently now the big thing in the room now is they're just kind of measuring up Michigan and Washington in the Rose Bowl, and I'm like, I think these people, talking about that, they're just assuming that Georgia's just going to just handle Bama, and that's kind of a gimme. Because if Alabama beats Georgia, we're not playing Washington.
No, not playing Washington. Yeah, we can't make any assumptions about any of this. I didn't take a poll on this, but I'm guessing we would have had 75, 80% vote Oregon as the winner of this game.
Yep, I voted for Oregon.
Yeah, I thought they were going to win. I'm not surprised. Maybe now this is one case where maybe Vegas influenced me too much, but they're usually right. But they were way off on this one.
Well, and I'm guessing it's probably just because, going from the time they originally played, Washington's been kind of on a more of a downslide, and Oregon's been more of an upswing.
Yep, that's exactly what I've been running down here, is exactly that. But we've seen this before. Teams can show up one week and then completely dismiss and get past how they've looked the previous 4 or 5 weeks, and vice versa.
Yeah, and another thing I saw is that I guess everybody now says that I guess Jaden Daniels is going to win the Heisman because Oregon lost. But I mean, I'm trying to think of the stats in my head. I don't think Bo exactly had a bad game, did he?
No, he didn't have a bad game. They had his stats on the bottom.
I think he had 3 touchdowns to 1 pick
at some point late. Yeah, I don't know what his stats were exactly. I can look them up, but and depending on your view on the Heisman, again, if it's just a player award, which is what it's supposed to be, it's supposed to have nothing to do with winning. Doesn't say anything in the Heisman definition about winning.
Right.
It says most outstanding player. But I got to think that, I don't know that he really gave himself a good look tonight. Not that he played a bad game, but he didn't play a great game, and they lost. And a lot of Heisman voters will take that into huge account.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit closer now because I personally think that if he'd had these stats with an Oregon win, I definitely have Bo Nix. But I think I take a little bit away from Jaden Daniels because he, and I mentioned this earlier, he played pretty much every offensive snap LSU had all 4 quarters, where Bo Nix was usually sitting on the bench for most of the fourth quarter in these games.
So who were you giving when you make that comment? Are you crediting Jaden Daniels for playing all those snaps? Or are you saying Bo Nix would have had better stats?
Bo Nix would have had better stats. If Oregon wasn't, handling teams pretty well to the point that he had to be the fourth quarter to compete for all these, I think Nick's stats would have been, I don't know if his rushing stats would have been as good, but his passing stats would have been right up there.
See, my thought in that is, I totally agree with what you're saying. Just like, look at JJ McCarthy. Not that he's really in this race, but his stats were compromised greatly by not playing in the fourth quarter hardly at all until late in the season.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other thing to think about, though, is Bo Nix was playing in much more meaningful games than Jaden Daniels. Once Jaden Daniels lost to Alabama, that was pretty much his swan song. That was the last meaningful game he played. And I have to give it up for guys that are playing with championship pressure each week in impactful games.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily hold, a team's record against them, but my view is that if you're, a team that has 3 or 4 losses, you need to have statistics that are considerably above the second place team that, it might be an 11-1 or 12-0 or maybe even a 10-2. Kind of like the year RG3 won, Baylor was 8-4, but the gap between him and I can't remember who got second place.
2011. Who would that have been?
I know for a while I think it was Pat White.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't know if he was
I would
there at
hope
the
that
end.
Honey Badger had some votes in that one. Not that he was that close, but 2011, were they 8-4? They might have been 9-3, but whatever they were, I think they won a bowl game after they went 8-4. I think you're on that. 9-4. They scored like 68 points in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah.
But when did Bo Nix? Yeah, he had a great season, but where's the Heisman moment? Where is the I pulled a game out of the fire? So he had 2 opportunities and neither one worked. Like Michael Penix had the game in Seattle against Oregon. He had the great drive to end the game.
Well, and I guess for that definition of the quote unquote Heisman moment, it has to be like a close game. Because
it has to be a close game unless you're an aberration of an athlete like Charles Woodson and you're making one-handed interceptions on the sideline against Michigan State. Nobody remembers. I have no idea what the score of that game was. But yeah, for a quarterback, it's more leading a drive down the field, playing in the clutch.
Yeah, and see, for me, I had Bo Nix as my Heisman leader after the Utah game, because this was back when Utah kind of hadn't fallen off, because Oregon went into Salt Lake City, into Rice-Eccles, and just put an absolute beating on them. And you don't see Utah losing in Rice-Eccles very often, and you definitely don't see them losing by no damn 4 touchdowns either. And Bo Nix just played a gorgeous gem of a game that day. And I thought that was when he kind of said, okay, here's my Heisman stage. Come get me.
Baylor, by the way, was 9-3 before the bowl game.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was 8-4, but 9-3. So.
I was right there with you. So I would, if I was a Heisman voter, I would take this very seriously. People ask me all the time, and I don't give it I don't give it 30 seconds of research to really, I would really dissect it and really think about, okay, what am I looking at here? What do I need to see? I would get to a certain point in the season and I would look at the cut-ups of each player's game, not just to look at the stats, but to watch them play and take it seriously from that standpoint. But after these 3, I'd have to go to the rushing stats to see if there's anyone I like there. I know Ollie Gordon of Oklahoma State had a great year.
It's become for all intents and purposes, it's become a quarterback award, unless, a skilled player just absolutely blows, everything out of the water. And I don't see any skilled players this year who had stats that just warrant that they win it and that's it. Marvin Harrison, who many consider the best wide receiver in the nation, he didn't have like these storybook stats that made you think that he's going to win over a quarterback this year.
Yeah, the 2 running backs that I remember, and I'm saying that they're at the top of, who had a great season. I'd have to look at his game log to see when he didn't have big games, because he ran for 1442 is Omarion Hampton of North Carolina, because every time I was watching, he was running for 180 or 90 yards. But Ollie Gordon and Cody Schrader, the Mizzou back, he had a great run at the end of the year, but those guys all got off to late starts. Yeah, Malik Neighbors led the nation in receiving from LSU. That's not surprising.
No.
Rome Odunze, Washington's up there at number 4. Tony Franklin for Troy Franklin of Oregon's number 3. Yeah, I would. I think it's pretty clear, those 3. And again, if I had a vote, I'd do my homework and really look into it.
Yeah, because at this point right now, it's kind of a 2-horse race, and like I said, I would lean Bo Nix very, very, very slightly, but it's I mean, if somebody said Jalen Daniels won, I wouldn't say okay, I don't understand that. I could definitely see why they'd make that argument.
Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with any 3 of those guys. Actually, would not have an issue. Not at all.
Yeah. Well, so I'm just, glad I got to see a good game, and I'm be looking forward to a lot more games tomorrow.
Yeah. This is the day that I'm not a frustrated football fan because I can't see a bunch of games because there's too many games on at the same time. This is when you can watch them one at a time pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Well, I think the Big Ten and the ACC come on at the same time.
Sure.
But other
Like
than
I
that,
say, pretty much you can watch them one at a time, basically.
And with Washington winning, your Buckeyes have still got a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, if we're sitting here at 3:30, 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and they still do, then maybe I'll start thinking about that. But
yeah, well, I mean, there's no 100% either way, but my contention is that if Washington, Georgia, Michigan, Oklahoma State, and Louisville all win, there's a chance.
Well, the last caller made a good point that if all that happens and Georgia goes down, then Ohio State is lost to the number 1 team in the country on the road.
Well, but the thing is that if you said, are you talking about if Bama beats Georgia?
Yeah.
If Bama beats Georgia, Ohio State has no shot. There's no way Georgia gets out over Ohio State. None. I don't see any 12-1 team other than Florida State that Ohio State can get in over.
Yeah, you're probably right, but it probably shouldn't land that way. But Georgia gets a lot of consideration for the past, which is stupid.
Well, and also, like I said, the committee also values that 13th data point.
Usually.
Like I said, I don't.
Usually.
I think that if it came down to, like I said, if it came down to 11-1 Ohio State and 12-1 Florida State, I think they'd give the nod to Ohio State, and they should, because they are a better team than Florida State, in my opinion. And this is independent of Travis being healthy or not. I would take 11-1 Ohio State over 12-1 Florida State with Jordan Travis, and I definitely would over Rodemaker. But I mean, maybe that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's most people, and I think that's probably the committee too.
Yeah, I think they would too, because the general consensus is that Florida State pretty much has to win to make this, because they're kind of on borrowed time right now, especially after the Travis injury.
What have we seen? 3 teams. I think it's been 3 teams that did not reach a conference championship game make it.
Yeah, it's not common. And Ohio State's one of them.
Ohio State twice, Bama
And
once.
Bama once.
I think that's it.
I can't think of any others besides Ohio State and Alabama.
Yeah, it's really not worth talking about at this point, but that's what we do. We talk about all this stuff, but man, it's like you said earlier, it's a long odds parlay sheet.
Yeah, and I'd say if everything happens in 24 hours, we can talk about this again.
Yeah, because we'll be 12 hours away from the magic hour.
Yep. Then we can, figure out where all the dominoes fall.
This committee is one step out of 4 away from having like no work to do, just basically shutting off the final game and saying, we'll show up on ESPN tomorrow because basically, we need to come up with a rankings after number 4. I guess we can just kind of slap that together, but the 4 are the undefeateds, or they could have a mess on their hands where I hope they would be basically staying up all night to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of like the idea of quote unquote embrace the chaos. I mean, just to have some sort of talking points. And I know you being in the media, you'd love it.
Love it. Love it. I haven't embraced it enough this week. I had people asking me for scenario breakdowns, and I should have done that, but I didn't get to it. Yes, that's what I'm looking for. For a fan, as a fan, obviously I'm looking forward to it, but just doing what I do. Yeah, I want chaos because it will be nice to have, it's good for business to have pissed off fans at 1:00 tomorrow or Sunday. That's good. And and that's going to be, there could be multiple texts between Texas, Bama, and Georgia, possibly, maybe something like that. And Ohio State fans will, they will certainly have their share of whiners if they get left out in some fashion.
Yeah, the Alabama Texas thing just kind of, that kind of pays for itself because, the argument in my opinion, it basically comes, assuming Bama wins and Texas wins, it comes down to, what do you prize more, the resume or the head to head? Because resume, obviously, in my opinion, obviously is Alabama, but the head to head goes to Texas. So, which one do you elevate more?
And that's where, if Oregon would have won tonight, then Texas, Bama, Georgia all had one loss. Then if I'm on the committee, then those games between each other, meaning Georgia, Bama, Texas, of course, they're extremely important, but then you have to basically line the 4 of them up as 12-1 teams and then go through the item list of who's got strength of schedule, who did this, who did that, best wins, worst losses, conference championships, and all that.
I think conference championship should be the number 1 in the pecking order because, if Bama was to beat Georgia and Georgia got in and Bama didn't, that would be a terrible look.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's going to happen.
Yeah, and that would be something that the committee they'd get raked over the coals have it explained ad nauseum. Okay, well, I guess I'll go ahead and bow out of here and let the next person call in, and hopefully after all the the chips fall tomorrow, I might call back in again and see what we're dealing with then.
Well, Mike, it's got to feel good sitting in the catbird seat watching the rest of the country struggle.
I just want good games, and I just want Michigan to do what they do, and I kind of want to see Bama beat Georgia personally because I kind of like that one next to us.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Yeah, Michigan, if they take care of business like we all expect, they're the one team in all of this that's really not affected or impacted. Now, this is easy for us to say, but like those players have to go out and play a football game tomorrow and hit people and run into people and tackle people and do like really hard things against a good football team, a really good Iowa football team. So this is easy for us to say. But if the resume and everything that we've seen through 12 games comes to fruition and Michigan's able to handle that business in relative ease, then yes, the rest of it's the drama. That's going to be 31-10 or whatever it turns out to be. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. And I got to remind everyone, let's get these super chats, and then we will make a few reminders. Matthew Miller's here. Appreciate you being here, Matthew. So Matthew hosts our Texas show on Wednesday nights, Bleeding Burnt Orange. And man, is he going to have a lot to talk about this Wednesday, regardless of what happens. Hey, Mark, were all these people saying I was delusional about my Oregon take? Pretty quiet, almost like strength of record, strength of schedule matters so much for eye test. Matthew and I talked about that, and he probably did solo. But Matthew and I talked about that with all this Oregon love, this just ridiculous love for Oregon. And I have ranked them high, spoken very highly of Oregon the entire season, but shouldn't have been ranked ahead of Ohio State. Come on. And really, best wins, Utah, Oregon State. Okay. All right. Good teams. Top 15 or 20 teams in the country. Nice. They beat 2 8-4 teams. All right. That's it. Other than that, I'm tapping my fingers. Yeah. They've beaten about 3 or 4 good teams. They beat USC. They're 7-5. How good are they? What's USC? A top 35, 40 team? And again, Utah and Oregon State. And they slid by Texas Tech. I think that game, I bring it up all the time. I think that one gets dismissed way too much, that Texas Tech Oregon game. I think people just, 38-30 is early in the season. It was in Lubbock. Yeah, Texas Tech is not a really good football team. They're a top 60 football team, 50 football team. They're 6-6. Texas beat them by 50. And yes, absolutely. So Oregon, really good season, really good football team, and they are out. They had every opportunity to get it done. And they lost twice. Georgia Reload. Mark, do you think Ohio State is a better team than Washington? Yes, I do. I think the 4 best football teams in America are Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, in some order, with my most confidence being that Georgia's the best. Yeah. And then Texas, extremely close. And certainly, I don't think that there are major drop-offs anywhere among the top 8. I think when Jordan Travis is on the field, I don't want to discount Florida State in any such way, but I don't believe, had to face up to my Florida State guys this week, that they're in the elite category. If they pull out a win tomorrow night against Louisville, I don't care what it looks like. They should be in the playoff. It shouldn't even be evaluated. Shouldn't even be talked about. If they win 3-2, don't even talk about the game. The playoff committee, worry about more important things. Figure out the rest of it. They're in the playoff. Don't even talk about it. They may not be a top 4 team. I will forever pound my fist and say, nobody knows who the 4 best teams are. When there's this call for select the best 4 teams, we don't know who the 4 best teams are. We're a lot of imperfect humans. We don't know. Nobody knows. I posted, that's who I believe are the 4 best teams. Georgia Reload, and thank you for the contribution. I posted on Twitter last night. You should all follow me on Twitter if you love, it's a microcosm of what we do here. I throw stuff out there all the time, get responses. I respond back most of the time, all of that. So follow me on Twitter, MarkRogersTV. But I love doing stuff like this. I went through every playoff year. I listed all the teams in order of record, best record to worst record, who I believed were in the running for the college football playoff that year, and said, who are the 4 best? Who are the 4 best? The playoff committee is supposed to be selecting the 4 best. Like that is a reality. Like that's actual truth. It's not. But who do you think are the 4 best? Because they're supposed to be selecting the 4 best now, but they didn't select the 4 best last year. And again, do we truly know who the 4 best are? No. But it's a pretty easy argument to make that TCU was not one of the 4 best. Cincinnati was not one of the 4 best. Michigan State was not one of the 4 best in 2015. Oklahoma was not one of the 4 best in 2019. Those are pretty clear to see. And I'm not even talking about in the aftermath of all of those teams getting drubbed. I'm talking about in the moment. Like I sat here and said, well, TCU needs to be selected to the playoff, but they're not one of the 4 best. They're like the 8th or 9th best team in the country. And Cincinnati's like the 15th best team in the country. But they need to be selected. They went undefeated, and they just so happened to luck into a game against Notre Dame. They took care of business. They didn't luck out in the game. They won the game fair and square, but they lucked out in a scheduling manner that a game that was scheduled in 2014 fell in their lap 8 years later, 7 years later. Michigan State was not a top 4 team. Yeah. All right, let's get to it. Appreciate you all being here. We got, before we get to the next call, Ben says, forgot to ask you on your thought in having Michigan and Washington in the Rose Bowl, Pac-12 versus Big Ten. Well, it would be cool from that standpoint. Pretty much, this is another fallout of the 12-team playoff in the new era of college football with 48 teams being in a conference. The Rose Bowl is pretty much dead. It's done. It's gone. To me, there's no Rose Bowl. It's over. The history of the Rose Bowl, you might as well shut the door on it. What was it last season? Penn State and Utah. And even that to me is not even a Rose Bowl game. The Rose Bowl, growing up and throughout the history of the Rose Bowl, was the champion of the Big Ten, the champion of the Pac-8, the Pac-10, the Pac-12. That's the Rose Bowl. It's not, a Penn State team that can't beat Ohio State and Michigan that's in 3rd place in the Big Ten taking on a Utah team that's lost 3 games. And they're the Pac-12 champion, which is fine. We've seen Pac-12 and Big Ten champions in the past have 3 losses. But, yeah, unfortunately, the Rose Bowl, to me, has been kind of dead for a while. The last time I saw a Rose Bowl that I really felt like it was the Rose Bowl, it's been a while. Anyway, but it's clearly dead. I don't care. Just having these bowl games play as playoff games, I think, is the most moronic, idiotic thing. They're playoff games. They're not bowl games anymore. They're playoff games. And to have Georgia and Oklahoma, bad example since they're both in the SEC, but there will be same conference teams playing in the playoffs, playing in the Rose Bowl. That's no longer the Rose Bowl to me. So, yeah, I guess for people that are into that, and I was into that when it meant something, that want to see traditional Rose Bowl teams in the Rose Bowl, yeah, they're going to get that for the last time. 12-team playoff, this Rose Bowl is always going to be in the playoff, right? We'll see. We'll see what they come up with, but it pretty much has to be somewhere in the playoff. So that's, to me, the end of the Rose Bowl. So, yes, in terms of having just lucking into traditional Big Ten and Pac-12 teams being in the Rose Bowl. So I think you're talking from a historic standpoint. Do I think that's cool? Yeah, that will make me think of 1980, 1992, 93, 1970. One of the first Rose Bowl memories I ever had. Not that I really remember the game, but Warren Moon playing for Washington, and they were a underdog against Michigan, winning, I believe, 27-20 in the 78 Rose Bowl. And then Michigan, Bo Schembechler's first Rose Bowl win was against Washington, 23-6 in 80. And then the back-to-back Michigan-Washington games. The first game was a Washington just rout 34-14, and it wasn't that close. Washington was a great football team in 91 with Steve Emtman, Mark Brunell, when they won the national championship. But then Michigan got the revenge the next year with Ty Wheatley, had a huge game, 38-31. Yeah. Good stuff, Ben. Appreciate you being here. All right. Michael, welcome in the voice of college football, sir.
Hey, Mark, I hope you're doing better.
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
Not bad. Hey, good
Thank
game,
you.
but I thought the way it was going, man, I thought it was going to be a beatdown of epic proportions tonight.
Epic
Did Penix have the game of
proportions.
his life tonight, you think?
Huh?
Do you think this was his best game of the season for
Whose?
Penix? For Penix?
No.
Or
No,
were
I
you,
did
were
not
you
think it was
rank
his
it?
best game. No.
'Cause, I mean, I think with the interception, I didn't quite see it, but was it a deflection or he just overthrew the receiver? Because other than that, I thought he had a pretty decent.
Oh, he had
Yeah,
a really good
that's
game.
what I
I'm not picking on him that he had a bad game. He had a really nice game. Wasn't his best game.
What was his
Uh,
best game this year?
Well, he had a couple games where he just torched bad teams, but in terms of having a great game against a good team, his first game against Oregon.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if tonight's was better. I thought it might have been tonight's was better than that first one and stuff like that.
Well,
But anyway,
statistically, what are we looking at here? I got it on the screen. He went
27 to 39 for 319 and one touchdown, but one
yeah,
interception.
well, he's had 3 and 4 and 5 touchdown pass games, but first game against Oregon, I think, was his best game. But yeah, he had a really nice game. Absolutely, he did.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering because he like tonight there, and there's like what 2 or 3 passes that he just like put a little too much air on that he could have easily been touchdowns if they weren't overthrown.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah, but I do gotta ask you this. So I talked to you about this earlier and stuff like that. If it's a close game with what happened tonight and stuff like that, and say Rodemaker plays tomorrow, and Florida State does beat Louisville, and Texas smokes Oklahoma State, but a Bama game is like it was last week in Auburn. They score late. Do you see the SEC getting shut out, or regardless of what happens in that game, Texas is pretty much all but done?
Oh man, Michael, I tell you, it is hard to believe that the SEC could get shut out of a playoff, but that's probably what should happen. You've got 3 undefeated teams, and then you got a Texas team that holds a very meaningful tiebreaker. 2-score win on the road.
Yep.
And I got to say that this Bama performance last week, why they don't take any kind of hit for this, or it doesn't seem like they have. And we talked about that. You brought that up earlier tonight. And I kind of corrected you in a sense. I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was just saying it's impossible to know whether the committee has downgraded them because of that woeful performance. If Auburn just like sets up a picket fence at the goal line, they almost can't lose the game.
Or maybe try to get more pressure on. Maybe try to get more pressure instead of just playing up. Hug a Bama offensive lineman, but I digress. But no, anyway. But part of me also thinks Jock holds tomorrow. Part of me thinks that Texas did that, but also Chalk holds and all the undefeated Michigan wins, Georgia wins, and Florida State wins. If that was the case, how would it shake out? Or is it just going on how the games play out tomorrow?
You said chalk. Chalk is going to be 4 undefeated teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then
I just wondering how it's going to shake out. Like who's going to actually be the number one between Michigan and Georgia, and then who be 3 and 4.
Oh, Georgia's 1. They're already number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Then if they beat Bama, that's a better win than Iowa.
Yeah.
It's going to be Georgia, Michigan, Washington, FSU.
Mm-hmm. But there's no way of Michigan leapfrogging Georgia.
No. They could win 105-0. No, they're not leapfrogging based on beating the number 17 team in the country when Georgia's beating the number 7 team in the
17
country
in
or
the
whatever
country.
they are.
Or yeah,
8.
no, the number 8 team. Man, I tell you, Mark, I feel for you, man, because that guy's got to be giving you fits, man. I feel for you.
That's all right. I just have a eye infection. It was just very strange. I went to bed last night. I felt fine, and as soon as my head hit the pillow, it just felt like there was something stabbing me in the eye. And I'm exaggerating. Just felt very uncomfortable and irritating, and my eye was just watering all night. And I did everything try to figure out what was wrong with my eye, and then I just went to the doctor, and they said I had some kind of corneal infection. So,
Was you wearing your contacts?
no, I haven't worn them for about a week.
Cause I was saying, because that's how mine usually happens. Like when I'm sleeping, I might rub it, and then the contact will rub against the.
No.
That's the first thing that.
You sleep with your contacts in, huh?
Yeah.
No, I don't do that.
Yeah, I was just wondering stuff. I mean, I don't always do it all the time, but sometimes it's a pain to get them in and get them out and stuff like that too. But no, I was wondering because that's the first thing in mind to me. Happened with me is when I get eye infections is because like I'm sleeping and it's rubbing against the scratches the cornea and stuff like that. But I am done playing Dr. Hoagie.
Now, Michael, you are or you are not going to the Big Ten championship game?
I am actually going tomorrow.
Oh, good.
Yes. Providing my games get done in time. I got 3 basketball games I got to work tomorrow.
Do you have to work?
Oh, no, I'm going as a fan.
Nice.
Too bad you can't make it, but I guess Corey got credentials.
Well, I could have tried. I guess if I knew that Corey made a comment to me whenever that was. Well, we did another Iowa show, a special edition yesterday, and he said something to me because we had Elliot Clough from Rivals on, and he's going, and Corey said, "Yeah, we'll have to get together for a steak." And he goes, "Too bad Mark's not going. I don't know why Mark's not going." And I was thinking, well, if I knew that Corey was going, maybe I would have given it more consideration and put in for credentials, but I didn't even think he was going.
Yeah, I didn't think he said he didn't think he was going to get credentialed, but I think it was Erica told me to get credentialed. So
yeah, yes, he did.
Stuff, so.
But we're trying to watch all the games here, so
yeah, true. But I mean, it'd be nice seen in person, but it's even better when it doesn't cost you nothing, but maybe a few bucks to get some food and stuff. So actually, what I'm referring to is like delivery, like DoorDash or something. Sit home and watch it instead of being there with 70,000 people.
Yeah, I haven't been to a conference championship game since 1998, 99. Yeah.
SEC?
SEC, yes.
Would have been Tennessee and Mississippi State or Ole Miss?
Yeah, Tennessee and Mississippi State in 98, and Bama and Florida played in 99. I was at that game, and I was at the 94 Bama-Florida game.
Okay, I gotta ask you this because it just triggered. Before they had the game in Georgia Dome, where were they actually playing the SEC championship?
They played 2 years at Legion Field. I actually just missed the second one, so they played 92 and 93 at Legion Field in Birmingham, and I went to the first. I didn't realize that until just a second ago. I went to the first one in the Georgia Dome. Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. I was wondering stuff like. All right, I gotta apologize for your last call you had earlier. Not the second to last call on your first stream.
Well, it was our buddy Chris.
Being tortured.
He hates the playoffs.
I know it is what it is, but hey, you can't please everybody. Anyway, I'm done. I got an early date tomorrow and stuff, and I'm sure you got other callers and stuff. But I will be on after the postgame show, and if I see Corey, I'll tell him that you're mad at him for not getting you a credential.
Yes, tell him that. Tell him I am, yes,
all right,
steamed at him.
All
right, Michael.
Get better soon, Mark. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Let me remind everyone here, you're doing Christmas shopping, right? Right? You're doing Christmas shopping. If you're at home, you're probably going on Amazon. Grab the Amazon link, please, in the description section of the videos. It's in every video. grab the link in the description section. It's easy to find. It says Amazon. Then there's a link. Grab the link, put it somewhere where you will remember it. And then you just use that link. And you're doing exactly the same thing that you always do, except you help contribute here at the Voice of College Football. Dr. C's here. Dr. C, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, Mark?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. You enjoyed the game?
Yeah, it was a good game.
Yeah, it was a good game. I also thought Oregon was going to win, but it didn't surprise me that I thought it'd be close. But I thought Oregon was, like the other caller mentioned, kind of going climbing, while Washington was kind of like a little bit on a downhill slope compared to what they started out as, and then they won fair and square. It was a good game for them.
Yeah, this love for the Pac-12, and I've been right there with everybody else. I have ranked the Pac-12 based on performance, based on the results this season as probably the best conference, even though I don't believe it's the best conference, but I think it's had the results. But I dug a little bit deeper and I started thinking about this today. What are these various conferences' records against bowl teams?
Mm-hmm.
And the Pac-12, because I started thinking, okay, what has the Pac-12 really done to back up all this love? And what has the Pac-12 done? Basically nothing. I don't see it. I don't know why everyone believes, and me included. I've kind of been caught up in it as well. I do think it's a really good conference. It's a much better conference than it was 3 or 4 years ago when it was a train wreck. But they've got 2 wins over bowl teams.
Yeah,
And I'm not talking.
there was a
good
couple of
bowl
years
teams.
there where I think it was maybe 2 years in a row where they had no wins at bowls.
Oh,
They
no
went
wins in the bowls. Yes.
yeah,
But
yeah,
they would win against bowl teams in the regular season. Right this year,
yes,
they got a win against Texas Tech. They're 6-6, and they've got a win against Wisconsin, 7-5. Those are the only 2 non-conference wins that they have over bowl teams.
yeah. And that Texas Tech win was Oregon barely beat Texas Tech, and Washington State beat Wisconsin. That was a
Yeah,
close game as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But it was a good year for the Pac-12. I've watched Pac-12 football for is it a decade old when it changed it from 10 to 12. Um, it's a good conference, like you said. Maybe a little hype this year, but I think we were just excited to see it. Oregon, Washington, Utah. It was fun to watch. But all said and done, I know when the season first began, the SEC was looking really bad.
yeah.
But I think now that the whole season's complete, would you say it's the best conference again?
Oh, well, I've always thought it was the best conference. I don't know that we could rank it the best conference if we're just going by results. I don't think
You think the Big Ten was better this year?
it's so close. Dr. C, it's so incredibly close. Like there's no conference that's just running away with it by any stretch. The SEC last year, the SEC beat Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Utah. You could rip off a litany of wins, Kansas State, a bunch of really good wins. This season, let's see, the SEC has beaten Kansas State, Kansas State. Who else is let me see. There's a couple
I'm trying
more
to
in there
think
that are
now.
decent. Kansas State, Louisville. There's their 2 best wins. They've got 5 bowl wins against Power 5 bowl teams.
Yeah. And last year they beat Clemson as well. South Carolina beat
Yeah,
Clemson.
twice they beat Clemson.
Yeah. I think it's still number one, not as dominant as it's been in the previous years, but I give them a slight edge over the Big Ten. Do you think Big Ten was the best conference? I mean,
No.
one can argue. No.
Uh,
What did you think was the best
Well,
conference?
if you're going strictly, if you want me to go by the results, then I'd have to like do a lot of math because it's so close. There's no conference that really showed to be the best conference. Like
Yeah.
again, if you want me to go by the results, that's an off-season project because yeah, if you just want me to tell you who I think are the best conferences, well, the SEC is the best and the Big Ten is the second best.
Yeah. I agree. I think so. I think it's a repeat of last year. Closer though. I think the SEC slightly, I mean, not as good as last year, but still on top. That being said, so tomorrow,
Yes.
do you see one or two upsets?
I haven't picked the games and I got to do that. So there's a stat for you right there. Records against Power 5 bowl teams. Big Ten's 5-6, SEC's 5-7, the ACC's 5-11, Pac-12 is 2-4, and the Big 12's 1-5. Most likely upset. Well, Louisville, Florida State, that's not really an upset anymore. The spread's 1.5. So that's not even an upset. I think the most likely upset's Bama over Georgia. Well, there's three upsets that could occur.
Yeah, as far as I don't see it. I see Iowa's having 0%, 1% to win that game. Yeah, pretty much. With that offense,
Zero.
yeah,
Zero.
that
Do you
offense.
realize what you're saying when you say zero?
Yeah, I say bet the house. If this is for entertainment purposes only. But if you have a house, put it on Michigan. If it's straight, just like who's winning tomorrow. Iowa has no chance of winning tomorrow. They can't score on that offense can't score on a high school defense. If Iowa beats Michigan tomorrow,
yeah,
I think it's a huge upset.
Well, of course it's a huge upset. What odds would you give Oklahoma State if they were playing Michigan?
Better. I mean,
really?
Maybe a 10% chance, 15 at the most.
You would give Oklahoma State 15% chance and Iowa 0.
Yeah. You've seen Iowa play offense?
Oh, I've seen them play.
Beautiful defense. That defense
I'm not
is
saying
fun
this
to
with
watch.
a whole lot of confidence, but if somebody held a gun to my head and Iowa was playing Oklahoma State tomorrow, I'd take Iowa.
I would take Iowa. Yeah. But Oklahoma State can score at field goals at least. They get into field goal range. Iowa punts.
You're ignoring.
And relies on special teams.
You're ignoring 2/3 of the game.
So is Iowa.
Well, no, they're not ignoring 2/3 of the game.
They're yeah, okay, you're right. They're ignoring a complete, maybe the most important nowadays, offense. It doesn't exist in Iowa. They might as well just have the defense and play out there in special teams because they have no offense. It's just it's really, we're watching a 2000 style football team play in the modern day. Is that fair to say? Or
it's fair to say. I think that card gets way overplayed for a lot of teams, though.
Yeah,
I hear that all the time. This team's outdated on offense, and this team's outdated on offense. And I don't think most people that say that really know what they're talking about. I think that and I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about like Jimbo Fisher. Okay, Jimbo Fisher runs an outdated offense. Okay, explain to me how it's outdated. And the people that make those comments, they can't make that explanation They just think that if you throw the ball a lot, then you're running an updated offense. And if you run the ball a lot, you're not running an updated offense. When in fact, teams like Ole Miss, who has one of the top 5 offensive minds in college football, they lead the SEC in rushing like 3 years in a row.
You're right. And then, those teams like, you remember the Baylor that was so explosive. They would run it 51% of the time. That amazing offense. Well, I shouldn't say outdated. I should say ineffective offense.
Oh, well,
Because it's three and
there's
out.
no question there.
It's three and out. And
I'm not debating with you. I just like to push back and a little bit on everybody.
No,
you're right. Their offense is horrific. It's terrible. I will say this. It's not quite as terrible as the statistics would indicate. They do play in a certain manner that lends itself to producing that kind of offense.
Yeah. And that would go to the play calling, right? And then it seems, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch. It really is.
For example, and Corey made this comment yesterday. He went to not that you had to go to the game to watch this. They're all on TV, of course, but he went to the Wisconsin game. And it hit him at some point in the game. Once Iowa got up definitely when they got up by 9 points, knowing we're up by 2 scores, like we're not going to lose. So they didn't throw the ball on 3rd and 5. They didn't throw the ball on 3rd and 12. They just ran the ball and punted. They would rather punt than try to get a first down in that situation.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? And I think, absolutely. And that makes complete sense just by the way that they've played all year. They have no confidence.
Sense because of how good their defense and special teams is, but also because of how bad the offenses are that are on their schedule. Against Michigan, you can't do that.
Yeah, how would Iowa do in let's say the Pac-12 or the SEC?
Well, we just determined that they're playing in the second best conference in college football.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, the Pac-12 airs it out a little bit more than they do.
They'd get more strip sacks and fumble recoveries and interceptions and I think people are so offense minded that they just think that Iowa would just get eaten alive in the Pac-12, and they wouldn't.
That defense could keep them in there. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, would it? There's some give and take there. Both are true. Both would be true. Yes, those teams would they be effective against Iowa's defense at times? Sure, they're really good offenses. Would Iowa's offense have more effectiveness hammering against the likes of Cal's front and some other teams like that? Yeah. Colorado. Yeah.
It'd be fun to see Iowa, Utah, Iowa, Oregon, Iowa, Washington. But I get your point.
We will next year. We'll see some of those.
Absolutely. Well, I won't keep you much longer, but tomorrow, could you see if Alabama upsets Georgia?
Yep.
That Michigan moves to 1, Washington to 2, Alabama to 3, and Georgia to 4.
And Florida State won or lost?
Florida State. Yeah, I guess Florida State would have to lose for that to happen.
Unless this committee really wants to put their neck on the line and do what they truly believe is selecting the 4 best teams and saying, Florida State, we don't care. They went undefeated, but they're out. But
Yeah, you're right.
If those games land the way that you just stated, Michigan won. Yeah, see they're in an easy spot with 2 and 3. It doesn't matter. They're showing up at the state game. They're just deciding what uniforms they wear, so it doesn't matter 2 or 3.
Yeah, you're right. And Bama's too far back. I think it makes sense if Bama was up, like if they were up in 5, definitely. But if they maybe 6 but they're in 8.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you can't. You got to let Florida State in,
yeah. And I
even
don't know
though
that Michigan should be so crazy about playing Alabama in a first round playoff game.
no, that'd be a great game. And it'd be a coin flip. I'd probably favor Bama actually, but yeah, we'll see tomorrow. I think that Florida State game, Louisville. They have to win it. You're going to be playing the third string quarterback, most likely. That backup is questionable.
Yep.
From the hit that he took the other game. Yep. Okay, I'll let you go. Hey, Mark, but
Thanks,
last
man.
thing,
Yep.
USC signed Lynn as a DC.
Yes.
Letter grade for the hire.
I don't know that much about him. I know that he put together a nice defense this year. If they would have had UCLA's defense this year, wow, they would have done some great work. So I know that athletic director Jen Cohen was involved in the hire. She seems like an extremely bright individual that may have helped Lincoln Riley in this search. So you put the football together with the kind of the business acumen of understanding hiring people and other things to look for. So I will lean on my USC guys for that because, again, I barely know who the guy is other than just knowing this year that he's the UCLA defensive coordinator. But it seems like a decent hire. It's not a home run hire in terms of name recognition like it would have been with Jim Leonard or if
Yeah.
Dave Aranda would have been available or somebody like that. I'm trying to think. There's a few other guys floating out there.
Tom
As
Allen
big
was
defensive
a
Tom
name
Allen.
people
Yeah.
wanted. Yeah,
Yep.
Lynn's defense looked good. UCLA with #1 defense for the Pac-12. They looked really organized, well coached.
Yep.
They can't be worse than what they had.
Oh, no. They've upgraded significantly. All right, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, thanks, Mark. Take care.
All right. Let's keep it moving. Jeffrey's here. Jeffrey, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, all I can say about that Washington-Oregon game is what a game. I know that's cliche. It's a lame opening, but I don't even know what else to say about it. It's two teams that are fantastic, balling out in a conference championship game for the college football playoff. Last time before, obviously, the loser of that game would still make the college football playoff in a 12-team playoff, for sure. So, I mean, everything's on the line. It's the final Pac-12 championship game. The conference is finished after that. I mean, you just can't ask for much more than that. It went down to the wire. And I got a lot of people in chat. I'm talking to a lot of people about I picked Oregon to win. And some people are like, should have picked Washington, should have went with your gut. Because I did, when me and Will talked about the game earlier this week, I was very close to picking Washington because Penix is fantastic. We know that. I remember him in Indiana. I remember him now at Washington. We've all seen him. He's great. But I felt like Oregon was the better team. I still do. I think overall that they're the better team. The better team does not always win the game. And that's the problem when you're picking based off of who you think's better versus sometimes your gut or what ends up happening. I mean, you can't always pick games right. I don't know who you pick. Who did you pick to win?
Oregon.
Okay, so me and you, same page. I mean, if you looked at both teams, you would agree that you feel Oregon was a better team on both sides of the ball all around than Washington.
Yeah, they've been playing better. Yeah,
and that's a complete point.
Yeah,
when you say that they played better than Washington, Washington was struggling lately. Oregon was blowing out teams.
Yep.
That Washington played. So, I mean, I think when you look at people talking about Washington, they're basing it all off of these two results. They won both of these games by 3, and I'm happy for Washington. I really am because, obviously everybody knows that I'm a fan of Michael Penix Jr. We know why, but I'm a fan of him, and I'm just glad he got his chance. And if he wins the Heisman over Bo Nix, somehow because of the fact that he won, both the games, I'm going to be so happy for him. But I think still looking at the results, of both teams throughout the entire season, there is no argument of who was the better team. Oregon destroyed Utah. Oregon destroyed Oregon State. Oregon destroyed a lot of teams that Washington barely beat. The Oregon State game, it was rain. That was, an exception kind of, but still, these two results of Washington barely beating Oregon are not indicative of who was better.
I wouldn't say that it doesn't present an argument. Of course, there's an argument, especially when one team is 2 games against another team. That's actually a better and easier argument to make that Washington's better. They played twice, they won twice. Especially the second game. This game tonight wasn't like it was anything close to a blowout, but they were clearly the better team tonight.
I get that. There was one moment though where it was 24-20 and Washington's going down the field, and that the pass that they did not rule a fumble after they reviewed it. It was a fumble on the field, then they reviewed it, and then that kept the drive alive for Washington. What if that play was a fumble? The game could have gone a completely different direction. Oregon could have gone down the field and taken a 2-score lead. Game's
argument, and I've made the same argument since they played in Seattle that Oregon's been a much better team, more complete team. It's not even debatable. Just look at the results. But when one team beats another team, it'd be one thing if one team beat another team and that team was 8-4 and they beat a team that was 10-2. But we're talking about an undefeated team beat now a 2-loss team twice. The proof is on the side of Washington. The proof of the debate, the burden of proof is on the defense, is on Oregon. So I get what you're saying, but I think it's very much of an argument.
I mean, I think sometimes, I look at stuff too concrete because I look at this team's better than this team's better than this team. Like, you look at like Auburn, like we can clearly say Auburn's a better team than New Mexico State, but they lost because they didn't play good. And then you talk about Auburn is a worse team than Alabama, but they almost won, and they should have won the game. 4th and 31. It's like stuff like that. That's the way my brain when I'm looking at teams like, okay, Auburn's this, they fit in here.
Sure.
And when you
the difference in that
results, people sometimes don't look at who's better. They're just like, well, they won, so that means they're better. It just doesn't work.
The difference in the Alabama Auburn situation is Auburn's a 6-6 football team and Alabama's an 11-1 football team. So
I get that.
There's a resume of difference to show that Auburn is not as good as Alabama. They're playing in the same conference, the same division, and they've lost 6 games versus 1 game. That's not the case with Washington now 13-0 and Oregon now 11-2.
I mean, I think it's an argument that has no answer. I still believe Oregon's better. I'm glad Washington won because I'm happy for Penix, and they definitely deserve to win. But I think that it's just, to me, I guess the irony of it is how I'm just looking at yesterday or even before the game, people were saying Oregon is better. And now that Washington's won, I'm just seeing people say that because there was a few comments that were saying Washington truly showed that they're the better team. I just disagree with that. I don't think that's true. I still think Oregon's better, but Washington won both games by 3. Very close games. So it is what it is. Like I said, I'm glad Washington won. So it doesn't sound like I am. I'm just saying as in general that's just the way I feel about the Oregon-Washington who's better situation. And all this isn't even going to matter anymore with the 12-team playoff because, again, both these teams would have made the playoff. Yep. See, now it's like it matters more because Washington's in, Oregon isn't.
Yep.
But it's not going to matter in the future.
The thing about tonight's game and where we can't get completely hung up on scores is in watching the first game and watching this game, to me, the first game was a complete coin flip. Dan Lanning made certain fourth quarter decisions and fourth down decisions that didn't work out. Questionable or bad decisions based on your perspective. Oregon drives all the way down the field at the end. They miss a field goal. The ball misses by 6 inches or we're going to overtime. Oregon showed in so many different ways. They outgained Washington by 140 yards. I don't know what the total yardage is in this game. I can pull it up here in a second. But they outgained Washington by 140 yards. They played on the road. There are so many factors in the first game that pointed toward me at least thinking, okay, Oregon, this game proves nothing. This game, Washington won by 3, but man, look at the last quarter. They completely controlled the line of scrimmage the last quarter. At one point, and this wasn't even after they got those big runs to seal the game, the total yardage was like 110 to 10. And they won by 3. They also sat on the football at the end, could have probably scored. Neutral field. It was just watching the line of scrimmage, the way the game was played, was a much more convincing Washington win tonight.
You're absolutely right. And I definitely do not disagree with you, Mark. I will say one more thing as well about it is that you look at the 3rd and 5 or the 3rd 4.5. If they do not get that, first down there, they punt and Oregon goes down the field and scores in the last 2 minutes of the game. And again, the argument is Oregon's better. So again, that's how close football games are.
Sure.
It comes down to a few plays. Washington, I agree with you that they look better in this game than the first game, but they got lucky that they were able to go down. Not lucky because they played great, but to just keep the ball away from them. Never gave them another chance because Oregon scored in 35 seconds the previous possession, just trucked down the field. And if they got that ball back, things could have been a lot different. But again, it was a great game, and that's it. I don't know.
To me, that is certainly not in the luck category when you're just pounding straight ahead. Like their offensive line, which shouldn't happen in that type situation, just other than throwing one pass, maybe 2, they just controlled the previous drive. They chewed up 6.5 minutes, and then that final drive when they just held out the ball, held onto the ball and ran out the clock. That is just brute football. Just you're better. They know exactly what you're going to do, except for one 3rd down pass, and you can't stop them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was very impressive what they did, but both teams are great.
But what you're saying here, Jeffrey, is, and I would love for people to take hold of this, because what you're saying right here is that you are able to watch football and gather information, watch football, and have an opinion that is not necessarily what hits you right in the face with a score, and still have a valuable, valid opinion and make a deduction on a game. So earlier this week, and a number of times this week, I made this statement. Now listen to this. That Ohio State's still better than Michigan. And, people were telling me that's asinine and that's And my statement was, I'm not saying that I am right for sure. I'm not saying that this is, I've declared this from on high, from God Almighty, that there's no question that Ohio State's, I'm just telling you that I still believe going to Ann Arbor, playing a game that close, your quarterback making that awful of a mistake to give up a 7-0 lead, and on down the line, I could point out a number of situations that Ohio State, I believe, is still better than Michigan. That doesn't take the win away from Michigan.
No.
That doesn't mean that Ohio State got ripped off. They didn't by the officials. I'm not claiming any of those things. I just still believe that they're better. Just like those same people were claiming last year that even though TCU beat Michigan in a playoff game, then Michigan was still better than TCU.
And that's true. It's absolutely true. Like you said, before I got on, TCU is not one of the 4 best teams last year. All those other teams you listed were not one of the 4 best teams. When they say we're putting the 4 best teams in the playoff, that's not true, because they've put teams in that were not clearly one of the 4 best. They just put them in based off the record. I completely agree.
Last year, Jeffrey, what did most of us think for the remainder of the season after Tennessee and Alabama played? That Alabama was still a better team than Tennessee. They lost by a field goal
team than LSU.
Road. Yes, exactly. That lost 4 games. There's all sorts of examples of this.
I think LSU was better than Texas A&M last year, but A&M beat them.
And then, I'll put that in a little different categories because we're not comparing like records. But anyway, yes,
I know.
absolutely. I'm with you.
The
And
talent's comparable.
And again, yeah, absolutely. And then to bring it full circle, 80 some percent of us, I would guess, based on all the feedback and all the talking that we do on here, after those teams left Seattle 6 or 7, 8 weeks ago and started playing other teams, most of us thought, and Vegas, 9.5-point favorite, thought
For sure.
Oregon was better than
9.5.
Washington.
And I still think that they're better. And the thing is, if people think that Washington's better, to your point, because I didn't want to come across as, bullish and that I'm right, because that's not true. I do. If people's opinions that Washington's better, that's cool, because there is an argument to your point. You're right. I just think Oregon's better. But like I said, I keep bias out of it because, again, I like Penix. I wanted Washington to win the game, but I still think Oregon was a better team. I still think that they are slightly better. And that's how you keep the bias out. That's how you keep –
and that's a legitimate
have facts.
Yes, that's a legitimate stance to take. Now, if you were saying, I think Stanford's better than Washington, well, then that would be ridiculous.
Then people would think that I'm insane and I should never talk again.
Yes, there has to be some facts and some data and, something to back it up. But yeah, that could be debated. We could debate all weekend who's better, Washington or Oregon.
We could talk about this.
And I think both are valid. Both are valid.
Real quick, because I know there's a lot of people behind me, but I have a lot of the stuff I wanted to get to. That was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your wise advice on that. On the Heisman, real quick, I know you're not a massive, you don't talk about it much because it's not as important anymore since it's just a quarterback award. But I mean, I'm conflicted because I think Jayden Daniels has done a fantastic job this year. His stats are insane, but they're a 9-3 team, and he's actually done better against top opponents technically than Nix and Penix. He's got better stats against top opponents. Nix probably has the best stats of everybody, and then you look at Michael Penix, his stats are worse, at least with the picks. Yards are great, but he beat Oregon twice. Who do you think should win the award, if you have an opinion on that, versus those three, and who do you think will win the award?
Yeah, so I don't know if you heard, somebody asked me that tonight, a couple callers
I wasn't
back.
on here yet.
And I got to tell you, this is what I would do if I was a Heisman voter. I would take it extremely seriously, and I would be watching every game. I'd have a cut down version of every game so I could not only just measure the players statistically, but watch them play, especially the important games. I don't like the fact that Jayden Daniels, and this is not his fault, but
defense was.
Well, yeah, the defense was horrific. Is that pretty much after the Alabama game, which was about game 9, something like that, 8 or 9, the pressure's off. There's really nothing to play for. He's just out there playing.
I get that, but he also could just quit, not even play it good anymore because that at least he kept playing well.
No, I know he wants to play for his NFL draft stock then.
Well, okay.
He's not going to not play well.
You know what I'm saying? He could have just opted out and like, I'm done. Like people said, Kale Williams going to opt out. At least he played through it.
No, my point is, Bo Nix and Michael Penix are going out every week needing to win.
You're right. I get that.
And that's not Jayden Daniels' fault. Again, so I don't have an answer because I don't have their numbers in front of me, but I know they're very comparable. But Penix hasn't been that fabulous for a while.
The Oregon State game wasn't his fault. The rain, I mean, I get it, but no one would throw a lot of yards in that game. But the Washington State game, he didn't throw for a lot. There's a couple of other games he didn't. So I agree. I would probably still say Bo Nix has a great shot to win just because, what he barely has any picks. But I think that Penix does deserve an argument for winning. I think Jayden Daniels does deserve an argument as well. I think all three do. But I would say Nix just because he has, no picks at all. He has, 3 all year. And Penix is, 9 or 8, and I don't know how many Daniels has. I forgot. But so I don't know. I just thought I'd ask that really quick. But
well, here's Penix right there. And so there's his game log.
8. And that was that's not counting the Pac-12 championship game. It don't look like. So he had 9 then because he threw 1 in the game. The yards are really good.
And threw a touchdown. So he finished at 33-9. And yeah, he threw for like 319 tonight. So he finished with about 4,200 yards. So that's Penix. And see, starting about the Arizona State game, he started to have some just okay games. Obviously, like you said, the Oregon State game, but it was in the rain, tough conditions.
And players were dropping balls everywhere that they started to abandon the passing game.
Yep.
In the second half. Like they weren't even doing it at all.
And then we got
if that was a clear weather day, it probably would have thrown for at least 100 more yards.
Oh, shoot. Then we got Bo Nix. And we got Nix. And his game log looks like this.
I mean, see that pick. The picks are insane. 3 picks all year. That's all he's done.
Yeah.
3 picks.
And so he threw for whatever tonight, 250 or something like that. So he's around almost the same yardage as Penix. And look at the completion percentage. Look at the completion percentage.
It's got to be Nix.
That might be an all-time record.
Wow.
21 for 34, so that brings him down a little bit tonight. But he's had to hit 77.5%, 78% for the season. Yeah, that's I don't know what the all-time record was going into this year. I'm trying to think who that was. I know Will Rogers was up there. A few other guys were, in that 74, 75%. But I think that's an all-time record.
Yeah, Will Rogers was high because they would throw a bunch of 2-yard passes.
Yeah.
I mean, not trying to throw shade at Will Rogers, but still, that was a bunch of dump-offs all game. But yeah, it's still impressive, though, regardless.
And we might as well get Jaden up here.
It's just an interesting question. I mean, I care about it, even though obviously it's against quarterback award, but it's still a big deal.
Of course it is. It is what I consider to be the most impressive or the most prestigious award in sports. 40-4.
See, and he has more rushing touchdowns as well than Nix. Nix is 6. He has 10. So he has 50 total touchdowns. Whereas I think Nix is like 45, 46, something like that. So, I mean, Daniels has the most touchdowns combined.
Yeah.
And he only has 4 picks. So, I mean, stats-wise, it's Daniels and Nix back-to-back. Penix is way behind, but the winning, it's Penix because he beat Nix twice. But I think if you're going off stats, and winning, it's probably Nix. But if you're going off stats alone, it's probably Daniels because he's got the most stats. He's got the most touchdowns. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously, looking at the stats doesn't really help because we don't know what angle the Heisman voters are even going to go with.
Yeah, I just referenced. No, that's for this season. Never mind. I'm still trying to hunt down the all-time completion percentage record, but I'm almost positive Bo Nix set it this year.
Yeah,
this is crazy, this rushing yardage number. So that also includes sacks.
Yeah, it's a lot of rushing yards. It's a lot.
He ran like a running back.
I mean, 234 rushing yards against Florida. I know it's Florida, but that game in itself, 5 total touchdowns over like 600 total yards against Florida. Yeah. I mean, that's impressive. That is very impressive.
Yep.
But, yeah, it's crazy. It's going to be interesting for sure. A couple more things. I know there's a lot of people in the waiting room for sure, but I do have to ask you real quick about Cignetti, the new Indiana hire. What do you think about that? I don't know if anyone's asked about it yet, but what do you think about it?
I think it's great. I think that I don't know a ton about him, but of course he's a winner, and he's done a great job at his previous stop. Obviously, did an outstanding job. Did you hear what he said at the basketball game?
Yeah, yes, I did. I was actually watching the basketball game, and because I was watching before the football games came on. Well, I think the Conference USA one, but I was watching the basketball game, and he was like, oh, Ohio State and Michigan and Purdue. He's like, Purdue sucks, and so does Michigan and Ohio State. And I'm like, on the one hand, I love the confidence, which I retweeted. I said, I love the confidence, but I mean, realistically, can you compete with those teams? I don't know, man. I love the confidence. I really do. People are taking out of context saying that he's abrasive and rude. I just take it as confidence, but I don't know.
I don't really take it. Yeah, I take it a little bit differently. I don't take it as he thinks like they suck in football, like they suck, because obviously as soon as you say your opponents suck, then if you don't beat them, then you really suck. And even if you do beat them, what does that say about you? So I don't think he was saying like they suck, like they're not a great football program. I think he was stating it in such a way like we're going after them kind of thing. Like they suck, they're our enemy, we're going after them. That's how I took it.
I agree with you. I definitely didn't take it that way either. But I mean, everyone, like there was someone in your chat earlier that said some nature of that he was rude to the reporter. I watched the press conference, and he just, to me, was just being confident. I don't think he was necessarily being rude. I mean, some of the questions were bad. I mean, they were asking like, can you compete with the NIL? Can you win games? And he's like, I mean, it's just like they just kept basically asking the same thing over and over again in a different way. And I don't really take that as him being rude. It's just him being confident. But that's about all I have to say on that. Last question on that is, do you think Indiana could have gotten a better hire, or do you think that is the best they could do? Because in my opinion, I think that's about the best they could have done.
I sure do. I was not overly surprised or anything. I didn't really give it a whole lot just because of the way that went down at the time that it did. There was just other things going on and all sorts of coaching changes, obviously. So I didn't give a ton of time to Tom Allen in Indiana.
It's Indiana. They don't matter.
I wanted to, but there was just way too much going on. But I saw that come down and I was like, I should do a video and I should do a live stream. But there was like 14 other things going on. So
hey, I would have been there.
I know. I thought of you and I thought, we could have a good live stream, the Tom Allen firing live stream. That would have been phenomenal, but just too much going on.
I appreciate it.
What the heck was I going to say? I lost my train of thought, but yeah, I think that's a good hire.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure. I think that, like you said, he's a winner, got a great record, 119-35, something like that. And he's won at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, Elon and James Madison, great record. And he was an assistant under Nick Saban back in from 2007 to 2010, and at NC State from 2006. So he's got a great resume. I'm looking forward to the games tomorrow. Last couple questions are, what game are you looking forward to the most tomorrow?
Georgia, Alabama.
I agree with that. I mean, I definitely am. And besides that game, like the Texas one, the second best, or like what other game?
Well, if I could only watch one game, I'm watching Georgia, Alabama. If I can only watch a second game, this is just because of what I care about and because of, you know what I'm going to say. I'm watching Iowa and Michigan. No question. I'm watching that game. I'd much rather watch that game than Texas and Oklahoma State or Florida State and Louisville, but that's closer to my heart. But in terms of it being a good game, well, I think the point spreads pretty much tell us what we need to, Georgia, Alabama, there's the most talent on the field and the most
fun
swag, the most brand name, all that. But then Louisville and Florida State, I don't know if it's going to be a pretty game or a fun game, but it should be close.
To me, about that game, like again, it's so many thoughts in my head, just so much. And I know there's so many people, but like last thing, like about this game, Florida State Louisville. I've talked to so many Louisville fans about this game, and a lot of them have said to me they want, people to take them seriously if they win the game, and basically overlook that Travis is out and possibly Roadmaker as well, and say that it was a legitimate win and they're ACC champions and that they're the best team in the ACC. And see, the only one that I can even get by with is to say that, they won the game. Yeah. And they, whatever. That's a great win. But people are going to use the argument against you with the injuries, because if Travis was in, especially if Louisville wins by like 3, good chance they're not going to win that game with Travis. And then no one's saying that they're the best team in the ACC, even if they win this game. Like, no one's going to say that. Florida State's still the best team in the ACC. It's not Louisville. I mean, if Louisville wins, great for them, but there are circumstances that definitely would have helped them out.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I guess maybe this shows our age gap and me not growing up in the social media age.
Trust me, I wish I didn't. It'd be cool to know what it was like back in 40 years ago.
You didn't care as much what other people were saying about you. You'd be like, we're the ACC champions. We don't give a damn what anybody's saying about us.
What a life.
We won the game. We won the championship. And they also have the same record in conference. Well, they would have the same record in conference overall as Florida
technically.
State. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. But we can make all sorts of conditions all over the place about what team has which players out and what does that say about this game or that game and how does it change it. I don't think that there's a huge gap between Louisville and Florida State. And no, is that game going to change? Let's say Louisville guts out a 20-17 win, and whether Tate Rodemaker plays or the third stringer, Brock Glenn, and they play, some kind of marginal backup kind of game you would expect. They go 13-24 for 150 yards, throw 2 picks. Yeah, I'm still going to believe that Florida State's a better team. Yeah, I'm still going to believe that, but I'm going to give Louisville all the credit. They are the ACC champions. And I think that Louisville could beat them with Jordan Travis.
I think they could too, but it would be a lot harder.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they would have to play a much better game, like the Notre Dame. Like, they play like they did against Notre Dame, they could beat them.
And they would win that game probably 3 out of 10 times. Yeah.
You're right. I mean, I do think Florida State's better. And definitely, even if Louisville wins, I don't think they're better, but congratulations to them if they do. I do hope today, Georgia loses to Alabama. So we get that scenario with Georgia, Bama, Texas, all hunting for that last spot. That'd be so funny to see what the committee's going to do. Because Bama beat Georgia, but you got to put Georgia in, right? And then Texas has the head-to-head over Bama. It's wild. It's going to be nuts. I don't know who you would pick in that scenario if it came down to those 3 teams.
If we have that scenario tomorrow night, anything close to that, we will sit here and we will grind through resumes.
I would be saying Alabama, even though everybody would be saying that I'm crazy and it's family bias. But I'm like, no, Alabama, they beat the best team. They haven't lost in 3 years. But nah. No, people like the head-to-head, because me and Will, it was so funny. Me and Will, he was like going so crazy. He's like, Texas has to be in over Bama because of the fact they beat him. His head-to-head not matter. I'm like, well, Bama's got the better win. He's like, it shouldn't matter. So the debates are already starting. I just hope it happens so we can have the debate. I'd be insane.
That is the only reason that I can think of that I wanted Oregon to win was I wanted to see Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Oregon all with 1 loss, 12-1, and then compare all of those teams. Have the committee have to line all of those up against each other. Because that kind of breaks down the Texas-Bama game's still important. I guess that's the only game that you got between any of them. Well, Bama, Georgia. So those are still obviously huge games and important. But then when it gets to that 4-team comparison, you almost have to throw those games out in a sense and just start comparing them all on strength of schedule, best wins, worst loss. What did their loss look like? You got to go through everything.
Yeah, and I know you're upset, Mark. Ohio State, they're at number 6, just hanging around out there, but they could still get in. If Florida State loses, Texas loses, and Alabama loses, they could get in at number 4. So, I mean, the scenarios are still all over the place. Either My family's going to be happy, or you're going to be happy, Mark, or someone else is going to be happy. Texas fan. I cannot wait. This is awesome.
I am not in any way holding out any hope that Ohio State's going to make the playoffs, but
I got the hope for you.
If they would somehow do it, there are going to be so many people that are going to be so pissed off.
Oh, man.
Oh, they backed into the playoff.
Well, do you think people will be more mad, Mark, if Ohio State got in the playoff that way, or if Alabama gets in over Texas in that scenario? Who would be more angry? Like, more people?
Are you talking about nationally or here? Here,
oh yeah,
more
Ohio
people are
State.
going to get pissed off about Ohio State
because you got the Big Ten, definitely Michigan, Ohio State, but nationally, like everybody.
But when you think about it, before I answer that, when you think about it, Ohio State has a more legitimate case this year than they did last year.
I agree with that because they barely lost, bro. Last year they got destroyed.
Yeah, they got whipped in the fourth quarter. They were playing at home. This last game, they got the ball at the 35-yard line. They missed a field goal at the end of the half. They were that close on the road. That's a much better loss. And if Georgia loses, Michigan's going to be the #1 team. So that's a much better loss than last year's. And look at what they did in the playoffs. They performed. People are going to be pissed off about Texas Bama. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about that because I don't know where everyone is on that. I think most people stick up for the head-to-head. So they'll get pissed and think that there's an SEC bias.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, they definitely would, but it's going to be interesting, Mark. More teams were good this year. That's why Ohio State is in the situation they're in. Last year, when you had the TCU 2-loss Bama and Ohio State, there was a lot more teams that lost. This year, more teams were good. It's going to be crazy. I can't wait. Definitely. I got Christopher Foote mad at me in chat saying I've been on forever. Sorry about that, but it's always a blast talking to you.
He should be mad at you. I determine when people,
I love talking to you. I mean,
I appreciate it.
I've had more good conversations with you besides my dad about college football than anyone else. Like you know what you're talking about. You're straightforward. You don't give bull answers, and you're just honest and legit. That's why when I found your channel 2 years ago, I've enjoyed it so much, and glad I've met so many great people in this community, especially you, because you do such a great job. I mean, I always enjoy coming on because I barely have any time to anymore. I'm up at 1:55 a.m. to talk to you when I should be in bed 2 hours ago. I do this all the time because I enjoy talking to you about this stuff. It is so much fun, man.
Well, thanks for being here, Jeffrey. We appreciate it. You do a great job. I always look forward to our conversations.
Appreciate that, Mark. Can't wait to be back on possibly tonight if things get wild. And even if they're not, I'll try to be back for sure. Thanks for having me on, Mark. Everyone like and subscribe to the Voice of College Football.
And by the way, Jeffrey, I'm surprised that Chris is back here ready to go with me because I cut him off and said, that it was, I don't know if you saw our conversation before the game, but I basically, I don't know if I called him a lunatic and said that was the end of it. But anyway, that I had it. So we will be kind to Chris and bring him on here. Thanks, Jeffrey. We appreciate it.
For sure, Mark. Have a great night.
All right, Chris. We always look forward to talking to Chris. Chris, how you doing tonight? I clicked him on. There we go. Hey, Chris.
Fine. I want to apologize to Jeffrey. It's just that, I don't know, I was kind of holding in the queue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Don't be mad at Jeffrey. Be mad at me.
No, I'm not mad at you.
But you can be mad at me. Certainly, I control these calls.
Well, there's no reason to be mad at you anyway, Mark. I consider you to be a friend. Maybe you don't consider me to be a friend, but I consider you to be a friend.
Well, so. That's very nice of you, Chris. I do appreciate that because, I'm not going to go into it, but I appreciate you bring some. I marvel at your. You have tremendous knowledge of college football history. There's no question about that. And I appreciate your perspective on all of this. And you're right. There are not to steer the conversation because I want to give you the floor to direct this conversation in any way that you want. But you are right. There are issues with this 12-team playoff. It's not going to be just all perfect and this is the best way to go. There are severe issues with it.
I'm not convinced that we're not already in a playoff. I mean,
Well, we are, sure.
a lot of things have to fall into place. I understand that, and Jeffrey already kind of talked about it. But if the conference championship games mean as much as I guess we kind of make them, then in a way, I'm not convinced that we're not already kind of in. I guess it's not necessarily 8, but 8 to 10 anyway. Teams already kind of on the cusp, and the results I think are weighed into consideration. I don't know. Like I think Jeffrey talked about, there's a chance, I guess, if Georgia beats Alabama, that they both might go, or they both might not go. I don't know. I guess it works either way, but I don't really think of things in those terms myself. But if the games themselves are as important as they ought to be, I guess, then it shouldn't be as hard as really weighing everything. Just maybe, well, the conference championship gets in, the winner maybe doesn't. Even though in that case, I guess if Alabama beats Georgia, I know you have to kind of, to be fair to Georgia, you almost have to kind of maybe even include them. I don't know, but I don't really, that's not necessarily why I'm calling though. I guess my main beef, not really that I have a beef, but traditionally, and I know you might not agree with this, but in my opinion, I guess a national championship, you don't ever lose. Now that might not suit many people. I think some people might say, well, that's not really true because there's teams, I guess, in history that have won a championship that maybe didn't win every game. But I think in a general sense, that's kind of how, at least in my research, I guess, I really haven't found very many examples where there wasn't a team that wasn't undefeated that won a title, didn't win a title. So just in my, I guess, my opinion lends itself to a team necessarily almost having to win almost every game. Now, that's not to be discriminative. I think, I'm sure there's good examples. I know Alabama, for example. Alabama, they've almost never been undefeated. I mean, well, that's not true. But of recent years, they've almost never been undefeated and still won the championship. But, that's partly, I think, because they play in the SEC. And so they're almost forced to win if they don't win almost every game, then they still almost deserve a second chance. Even this year, I think that might be true. But so there are examples, I guess, maybe aren't quite that way. But in general, though, I think that's why I'm not convinced that, he said, probably accurately, I guess, with the 12-team playoff, we're talking about possibly including Oregon with 2 losses, so, I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose, I think, of these conference championship games. I think at some point we might have to even consider whether they're even important enough to even keep them. But you're wrong about me having a beef with the playoff. I don't know that I really do. I just want to make sure that it works the way it's supposed to. That's all. That's really what my objection is. It's not that I have this big beef with the playoff that it's never going to work, or I really hope it does work. If you want to know the truth, I don't have anything against the idea of having a team run through the championship and win the title. But I think there's a lot of things that you have to kind of consider before you just go ahead and throw everything out and let's go to the playoff. And I mean, I don't know if you share my opinion on that.
Well, I believe that it's good that we're going to a playoff, an extended playoff, an expanded playoff. And this is truly going to be a playoff. And the reason I make a distinguishment between what we're doing now and a 12-team playoff is really this is an invitational. These teams are being invited. They have not met any kind of certain criteria to be selected to the playoff. We've got a committee. They make selections. It's an invitational.
Well,
it's not an objective playoff.
You said something. I mean, again, it does bother me in some ways. In ways, it doesn't. I mean, I guess if Texas Christian was one of the 4 best teams, they probably don't get beat 65-7. I mean, I kind of understand that, but it's almost like, okay, I mean, what's the reason? I guess I'm kind of curious then if the fact is that Texas Christian wasn't one of the 4 best teams. So like Michigan was overlooking Texas Christian. I mean, what's the excuse? Or I'm not even going to say it's an excuse. What's the reason why Michigan couldn't? I mean, I'm sure there's reasons, but I guess I kind of don't completely buy the fact that they didn't belong there if they can beat the team that does belong there.
Well, let's back up one step before we get to that, because what happened is that because of the way TCU played during the season, a lot of people were questioning their validity and their
a lot of close wins. I remember.
They pulled out a lot of close wins against decent teams, good teams, but not great teams. And therefore, they continued to pull out games. And we also know people understand the talent levels of these various teams and know that they're not one of the most talented teams.
Okay.
So they arrived against Michigan. They were a touchdown underdog, and they pulled off a win. Well, that win had a lot of controversial plays, also a lot of somewhat flukish type plays, but they won the game fair and square. There's
Well,
no debating that.
I kind of want to know what these controversial plays were. There was like a touchdown supposedly that said, but when they reviewed it to me, and I don't want to make a case against Michigan. I like Michigan; they're a good team. But the review didn't seem to me to overturn the, in my opinion, I think the right decision was made. And so at that point, you can say, well, momentum, whatever they call it, when you carry the ball. That was his name, the receiver that carried the ball into
Roman Wilson.
Yeah, he did score. But upon review, it looked like maybe he was down at the, at some point, I don't know. It didn't negate the play. It just negated the touchdown. So at some point, I don't know. You have to kind of
Michigan. Yes, absolutely. Michigan still had the opportunity to run the ball in the end zone from the half-yard line. Yes.
No, it was like a 60-yard completed pass to the one. It wasn't, oh, what a terrible call. They overturned it. No, not really. They just said it wasn't a touchdown. So it's like, if that's really the worst thing that could ever happen, I don't know if that's really justification for saying we should have won. But whatever. I mean,
well, you're completely right, Chris. Yeah, that Michigan has no excuses, nor do their fans, for them losing that game. They did not get ripped off or anything. I think their argument is more that they just, if you look at the resume for the rest of the season, if you look at the performance of the two teams, Michigan was clearly the better team throughout the rest of the season.
Well, I tend to agree with that. Agree with that. And I don't know what the reason was why Texas Christian was so bad in the championship game. That wasn't something I thought would happen. I'll be fair. I didn't know if they'd win, but I didn't see that coming. Not from a mile away.
Nobody saw that coming.
Okay.
Nobody did. And the reason I say that is because we don't even see 65-7 games during the regular season very often.
So no, go ahead.
No, I thought they were going to lose by like 28 points. Okay. I thought that was going to happen.
Well, I didn't really know. I was kind of holding up. I kind of like Texas Christian. I don't know much about them, but they were kind of my dark horse, I guess. That was kind of the team. I wanted to win. I kind of like bucking trends. You probably already know that a little bit about me. I don't mind if the better team wins. If the better team wins 65-7, more power to them as far as that goes. But I don't necessarily like seeing the same team win every year. But if they're the best team, great. I'm not like objecting to the result at all. Georgia obviously was the better team, no doubt. But I don't know. I just wonder moving forward if the playoffs going to necessarily make things better. Or, I have a question maybe about even how they're going to pick the teams. And it's like, I understand sort of why they're going to move to that direction a little bit. I think what they want to do, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, they want to make sure, kind of like what you're saying with the playoff at this point, it's like they want to make sure they have the 12 best teams. So how do you do that? And of course, there might be different ways to go about it, but kind of get the feeling that might be a way to kind of limit the participation to G5 down to almost nothing, which I'm not saying that's necessarily why they're doing it, but I know last year, for example, I was having an argument with Tony Altimore and those guys. Oh, look, we're going to make sure Tulane and I thought, okay, well, they're kind of being reasonable there. But then I found out later, the only reason they were putting Tulane in the bracket was because they had to. So really, if it was up to these guys, well, I'm being honest. If it was up to them, okay. So 1G5, that's really fairly representing an entire, I don't know. I'm not going to say it isn't, but to me, that's discriminatory, but maybe you don't share that opinion. 1G5 out of 12, that's pretty small representation, isn't it?
Well, when most of the time that G5 is not one of the top 12 teams in the country, there are different ways to look at it.
Oh, okay.
Usually it's not. Usually it is not one of the 12 best teams in the country. It might be ranked in the top 12.
You don't think Tulane was a top 12 team?
No.
Okay, well, that's fine. There was one last thing, if you don't mind, Mark. I was just going to ask what you thought about it, I guess.
Well, can I say something real quick, Christopher, about the G5 situation?
Sure.
It's long been my thought, and this is where I have stuck up for the group of five, is that up until Cincinnati's selection into the playoffs in 2021, that obviously, despite UCF being undefeated 2 consecutive years, they were not selected for the playoff. And I thought that was extremely unfair to them.
Well,
That my thought was, what else did they have to do? You know, if you win all of your games, what else can you do?
well, they
So
weren't in the
let me
playoff.
just finish my thought, please.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry.
I've said all this time that I wanted one of two things to happen. Either there to be inclusion of the G5, even if that was just one position that was guaranteed, or that the Power Five would say to the Group of Five, go play your own playoffs.
Right.
One of the two. And so at least they've given the Group of Five a spot, regardless of how good or not so good that team is.
Can I say one thing? And it's
Sure.
not really well, and it's not to contradict you, Mark. I think you're, and I'm not just saying this. It might sound like I'm, I think you're an very intelligent person. So it's like when you say something, it's almost like, remember that E.F. Hutton or whatever? It's like, I think it matters when you say, I mean, I don't know if you think about that when you do your podcast or not, but it's like, I think the reason people tune in is because they know that you know a lot about the sport. So it's like, if Mark Rogers says something, it's not like Joe Schmo telling the same thing. That's why I think a lot of people, or at least that's why I do anyway. I want to hear what you have to say. But the one thing I was going to say, kind of not really to contradict you, but in my it's really just been research is all I've done. I'm not a historian. People say I'm a historian. That's not true at all. But anyway, in my research, I found that the gap, or we want to call it it's 2-1 in favor of P5, which is actually fairly substantial. I don't know if you really know what 2-1 in terms of the overall, but what that kind of means though, and I don't know if it's accidental or not, but when I do my composite ratings, I went to look and to see if it wasn't like I designed it to do this, by the way, but my top 30 has as many as 10 G5s represented to it. Now I know you probably would say, well, that's overloading it or whatever, but with a 2-1 separation though, that's probably where it should be. So I'm not want to say that you're misrepresenting the G5, but you're probably underrepresenting the G5. I think it's probably fair to say that. If you don't have at least, maybe even 5, as many as 5, well, maybe not. I'll let you decide what the fair amount is, but when you don't really even have like 2 or 3 in your top 25, I don't know. To me, it makes you seem like you're a little bit prejudiced against the G5. Now, I wouldn't know because I don't know you as a person, but that's the way it comes off to me, because it's like, I understand maybe not wanting Toledo in there. They can't beat a mediocre P5, but then you don't even really include Tulane. I mean, kind of at some point, I don't know, Mark, it's a little bit hard for me to swallow that, I guess. If you're not going to include a Tulane that really barely lost to Mississippi, you even said they were pretty good.
Yeah, so I understand your perspective, but I'm not ranking these teams based on one game. So yes, Tulane, I believe I watched the fourth quarter of that game against Ole Miss. I thought they competed well. I think the game was actually much closer than the final score would indicate. They lost by 17 points.
Yeah, that's fairly.
It was a well played game. That was a one score game with like 5 minutes left.
That's still a substantial loss. I mean, that's not like I can see 17 isn't really like just barely.
No,
that's
But they competed well, and they're a really good team. My point though is, if you look at the entirety of the schedule, I'm not ranking these teams based on one game. Showing, and that's usually the criticism that's wielded toward me, is picking out like one game and saying, look what happened last weekend. They beat, well, I'm looking at the entire resume of the teams as best I can.
Well, okay. I'm going to say one last thing. I hope it doesn't make you mad. Liberty.
Yeah.
They won. Now, you can say, well, New Mexico State, big deal. But New Mexico State was like 9-3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, I mean, that's good. I mean, they beat a good team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that puts them in the playoff, because it doesn't, but how much better they have to be to warrant, not selection, consideration. And I don't even think they belong there, to be honest with you. I don't have them rated high enough to be in the playoff, but they should probably be in one of the P6s, or New Year Sixes. I don't really understand why there's even a question about that. Or is there one? There shouldn't be. Do you share that opinion, or is that too far out in left field?
So I'll state it this way, that if you look at the final rankings, meaning the AP rankings, not the college football playoff rankings, because obviously they don't do a rankings after the bowl games, but the coaches poll and the AP poll, you basically see that you have to go 9-4 as a Power 5 team to pretty much ensure that you're going to make the final top 25. And there may be an 8-5 team or two that reach it from the Power 5.
Okay.
And then usually if you're a 12-1, maybe in the case of an American Conference team, because the American Conference has been a really strong group of 5 conference, then you make the final top 25.
Okay. Well, I mean, I understand sort of what you're saying. I found a poll you might want to look at. Maybe you already know about it. CBS Sports. I mean, I hope that doesn't conflict with your ties to ESPN or anything, but
I don't have any ties to ESPN.
well, I used to work at them. But anyway, CBS Sports puts out I don't even know what they're based it on, but they kind of think it fits well within kind of what you're saying. But they have a few, 2 or 3 at least G5s represented. Not terribly high up in the ranks either. I mean, I think they don't have Toledo, for example. Toledo's like 11-1. They don't even have them anywhere. But and they have Clemson, I think, at 8-4 in the top 25. So it's like I actually agree with some of what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't know. I mean, I just kind of wonder, with this playoff coming through, that I don't really have an objection to. It's just that, I hope it's done appropriately to where a team like Liberty or maybe Tulane, maybe not. I don't know that Tulane necessarily deserves to go, if you want to know my opinion. So I actually kind of share your opinion. But I think Liberty should be there. And if there's not Liberty in there, then what's the point?
Let me state it like this. I'll state it this way, and then I'll let you have the final say, and then I got to move on to the last call here.
No, I understand.
I'll say it this way. Okay. Liberty's 13-0 now. And if we could rank all the teams from 1 to 133, and certainly we could.
Okay, well.
And I actually think all the teams should be ranked. I think that it's a travesty that we only rank 25 teams, because the issue I have with that is because then there's this whole misconception that, oh, well, you beat 3 ranked teams and they only beat 1 ranked team. And there are so many teams that are just out of the rankings that are basically as good as, it could be argued, the teams that are in the rankings. So it would be more equitable and it would be more transparent if we had every team ranked, and then we could say, instead of you're number 25 and you're number 26, but we really don't know that because nobody ranks past 25, we would clearly see, oh, well, they beat number 25 this week and they beat number 26 this week. And there would be little difference between those 2 wins. As it stands now, there's this perception that is completely different. Oh, you beat a ranked team, you beat an unranked team. Okay. As it pertains to the group of 5 and Liberty in particular, I don't know where it matters that much, or is that valid that a team wins 12 or 13 games against teams that are ranked 80th and 90th in the country?
Right. No, I agree.
And just because they we could keep playing. Let's say we had a 25 game schedule. Just because that would be impressive. It's hard to win college football games, but just because they beat 20 teams that are all around 100th in the country, why should they be ranked in the top 25 when there are teams that are 9-3 that had to play really difficult schedules?
I guess what I'm trying, I don't know. I guess I'm not very good at explaining myself very well. Like I said, that CBS poll itself, it actually, I think, covers every team. I'm not saying it's the last word on anything, but that's something people could look at, I guess. And it's online, and so it doesn't take long to find it. But I guess with my respect to Liberty, just because I have them ranked number 10, that doesn't really mean anything. I actually kind of halfway agree with you. It's like, that doesn't really matter. It's just that, but if we're going to limit it to 12 teams, I don't know. There's a problem, I think, if they aren't included. I'm sorry. I mean, that's just how I feel.
So let me say it one other way. This happens just about every season, and it happened this year with Liberty. It happened last year with James Madison, that at some point in the season, Those teams are rolling along. It's 6-0, 7-0, 8-0. And then one magic week, they show up in the top 25 at, let's say, 9-0. And that win that propelled them from 8-0 unranked to 9-0 ranked was some win over Georgia State, 34-22 over the 104th best team in the country. But just because they made it to 9-0, at some point there was a tipping point that people said, let's go ahead and rank them.
Right.
And it wasn't a true valuation of where they honestly place in college football.
Well, no, I halfway agree, Mark. I'm not trying to say you're wrong at all. The fact I have him number 10 is just, that doesn't even really, I don't even think it matters. I don't. But if we're going to have 12 teams, there better be a good team in place to Liberty. Otherwise, I don't understand what the point of a playoff is. It's just how I feel. I don't know. You can't expect them to do anything more than what they've done.
No, you can't. That's completely true.
They've beaten New Mexico State twice. I don't know. Maybe New Mexico State doesn't. And then Jeffrey said, well, we know that Auburn's the better team. I mean, I don't know. We really know that, huh? After they got beat 31-10. I mean, yeah, Auburn's the better team, but they lost 31-10, I guess.
Well,
but we don't know that they're better. We all know that they're better. I mean, I guess maybe I have to kind of say at some point, I kind of think maybe that's not the right approach. If we all know that they're better, they don't lose 31-10. I'm sorry.
Well, Chris, you're completely right, and you kind of sound like me on our previous phone call, because what we were debating, I started to have to tell you, don't the results on the field matter?
Well, they beat a 31-10, 6-6. So I mean, you have to weigh that, but they did beat them though.
Yes.
I think it does matter. Yeah. I'm not saying.
All right, sir.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you calling, and Chris, you can call anytime.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good day.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good night. All right. We were going to have one more phone call, but I see David's here. So we'll make it 2 more phone calls, and we'll make them brief because I'm like an hour and a half past when I should have put eye drops in my eyes, according to the doctor. All right, Adam, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how you doing? I'll keep it brief.
Oh, you're fine. You waited a long time, and I thank you for the super chat.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Look, the way I see it is the 4 best teams get in the playoff, and I don't care what their record is. I don't care if they're a conference champion. All right? Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, and Texas are the 4 best teams. FSU without Travis. Yes.
That's the problem.
Well, if you look at the talent on these teams, you look at how they've played. There's no way Washington, if they had gone through the SEC schedule, would have gone undefeated. FSU without Travis and potentially without Rodemaker, there's no way they're as good. These 4 teams are the best, and I'm getting a little bit kind of confused. Yeah, go ahead.
Something real quick, Adam. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, that's fine.
Understand everything you're saying. It's not factual; it's opinion. So I would love for the 4 best teams in the playoffs. I would love for us to come to a conclusion and know these are the 4 best teams in the country. But you know that person does not exist that can figure that out. Nobody knows that. Because
but
I posted on Twitter the other day. I went through every year in the playoff and said, these are all the teams that were in the playoffs. These are the teams that could have been selected for the playoffs. You tell me who the 4 best teams in the country were, since the committee is supposed to be selecting, in quotes, the 4 best teams. I got all sorts of responses. That's because nobody knows who the 4 best teams are, because you just told me they're Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, and Texas. I would tell you it's Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, and Ohio State. Somebody else would tell you it's Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Washington, or whatever. So who's right?
I don't think it's as subjective as you're making out to be, although I see your point. When I look at Florida State, yeah, they're 13-0, but their quarterback is out. When I look at Washington and their 92 or 93 ranked defense, could they compete with Georgia, Bama, Michigan, or Texas, even Ohio State? Absolutely not. And I think this artificial.
How do you know that? You don't.
How do I know that? Because I watch the teams play. I mean, you watch the teams
play. But there are all sorts of highly educated football minds, analysts that would tell you the exact opposite. They would tell you that Washington can compete in those games.
Well, I think that the eye test is what matters. And I think at the end of the day.
I'm telling you that there's not one eye test that we can take to be the eye test. Like, if you're the king of the world, then that's great. You would be the one to select the playoffs, but we don't have that person. They don't exist.
But if you were making this judgment, you and I would agree on 3 of the 4 teams.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you couldn't convince me that Texas is better than Ohio State. Well, you couldn't convince me, but I'm not saying that Texas, I would be surprised if Texas beat Ohio State in a football game. I wouldn't be.
Right. I guess my concern is that the committee doesn't seem to be focusing on who the best teams are. Because I bet you if we were in a room with 10 people, most people would agree that it should be Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Texas, or Ohio State. Okay?
Yep,
but the committee doesn't seem to be focused on that. Instead, they're focusing on either who's the most deserving, or they're engaging in these metrics by comparing resumes and getting so into the weeds. It's like, look at these teams play. I mean, you and I would agree on 3 of the 4 teams, and we could respectfully disagree on whether it be Ohio State over Texas. Mm-hmm. But I think you and I would get to a reasonable conclusion, just like I think most people who watch college football would, because we're focused on who the best teams are, not, you know what I mean? That makes sense.
If we were the only 2 in the room, the conclusion I think we would come to was I would say, well, if Texas wins this game tomorrow to win the Big 12 championship, then they should be in the playoff.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's all I have. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it, Adam. I hope you know where I'm coming from with this, is that I get your point. That room would need to be full of football coaches and scouts.
Right now
we got 13 people, and almost all of them are athletic directors.
I know,
that doesn't mean they don't know football, but they don't know it as well as other people that could be in that room.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying, and it may sound unscientific, but people who watch college football can tell who are the 4 best teams. Yeah. And I think if you had, people like that in a room, they would agree, like you and I agreed on 3 of the 4 teams. Enough with this TCU going in there, enough with FSU without Travis. I'm sorry. I don't care what their records are. I care about who the 4 best are. And I think you can get a room of people who could agree on that. And I don't think the committee is the right people to do it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And a lot of people agree with your bent on that. And I get it, because they want to see the most talented, best football teams competing for the national title. And I'll say it this way, and you can say whatever else you want to say, is in 2019, I don't know if you remember this year, Ohio State, LSU, and Clemson were all undefeated. Okay, they're in the playoff. One other spot left. And as soon as it was named, or even before it was named, when we were sitting here like a Saturday night after all the games were played, people were asking me who should be the 4th team. And I was saying, well, do you want the best team, or do you want the team that earned it? Well, the team that earned it's Oklahoma. They lost 1 game. They won their conference championship, blah, blah, blah. The best teams, Alabama. They're the best team, but they lost 2 games, and they didn't go to their conference championship game. So they're not going to get selected. But they lost on a missed field goal against Auburn by 3 points on the road, and they lost in a classic game against LSU 46-41. And that same LSU team put up 7 touchdowns in the first half against Oklahoma. They were not the 4th best team in the country. So
that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. It's like, who cares that Alabama had 2 losses? They were better than Oklahoma. And honestly, Mark, I'd even be willing to say that Ohio State is among the top 4. I think Ohio State probably is better than Michigan. But regardless, if we could agree on 3 of the 4 teams, and you get people in a room who have actually watched these games and have a little common sense, I think we can get to a better result than the committee's gotten to in the last few years. And I guess people may disagree, but that's just my thought.
It's a great point.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam.
All right. Have a good one.
So again, Adam writes here about toss silly Washington out of the playoff. The 4 best teams are Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Texas. And a lot of people are in that category. I know Colin Cowherd's in that category. He's just like, select the 4 best teams. In most seasons, he's like, I want Alabama there and Georgia there and Ohio State and Clemson or, whoever the next team is that year. All right, we got David here. David, what's going on tonight?
All right, Mark. Well, is it 4 best or four most deserved? Because everybody, we go back and forth on that, Mark. Have you ever said how you come down on that? By the way, I just want to get your clarification on that.
See, even though I like what Adam had to say, and he's right.
Yeah,
I would like a playoff with the 4 best teams in the country. Again, I don't know who has that perfect perspective to know who those teams are.
yeah. I honestly, it should be. I actually do think it should be the 4 best, because if you want the best games, you get the 4 best.
But who are the 4 best? That's the problem. Your 4 best are different than my 4 best, than somebody else's 4 best.
Well, you know what though? I mean, to be fair, and I'm going to come off what I say. I'd be an SEC homer to say this. A lot of times, the SEC has had 2 or 3 of the best teams in the country in the same conference. So,
according to you,
what's that?
According to you,
well, okay. 2019 would be a perfect example, Mark. 2 of the 4 best teams in the country were Alabama and LSU, but they both could not make the playoff.
I guess they were 2 of the best. I think they were. But...
Well, you thought they were because you said Alabama would have trounced Oklahoma that year.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's just my opinion.
Well, I think that you could probably back that up with some data to say that they were probably one of the 4 best teams in the country that year.
Yeah, we would have left TCU out last year.
Yeah, I don't think TCU was one of the 4 best teams in the country. I think if Alabama would have played TCU on a neutral field, they would have boat raced TCU last year.
Sure, they would have.
Yeah,
we would have left Cincinnati out of the playoff.
Right. And sometimes it's the deserved versus the 4 best. But you know what, though? Because the conferences are set up the way that they are, you don't always get the 4 best. I will say this. First of all, and I want to get to a lot of stuff, but I know you're on a truncated timetable because you're running on fumes right now. What have you been on here, about like 5 hours, Mark, or something like that?
Well, now it's only been 2.5.
Well, I mean, we could talk college football for forever, but I realize
am running on fumes. That's for sure.
Well, that's why I say I know that you're on a short time.
You can do all the talking, David. I'll just agree.
All right. Well, if you want to go that route, I've got a lot of ground to cover. I actually wanted to talk to my largest fan base out there. Well, your largest fan base. They're not my largest fan base.
I've got my blue
Mark.
on tonight.
Come on, Mark. You're better than that. Shout out to Wolf. Shout out to Moose. Shout out to Dependent Fanatic. I think Fort's still probably out there. All the crew are still out there. I'm talking to you guys. I hear you guys out there. What do you got, the Princeton helmet back there, Mark? Is that what that is?
I put it up there over my shoulder.
Yeah, please don't.
I got to start treating these people better. I've been really hard on Michigan. They're mad at me for saying Ohio State's still better.
No, you don't, Mark.
I've been called an ass and an idiot and a moron and all sorts of names in the last week for saying Ohio State's still better.
What did I tell you about the friends that you keep, Mark? It's like your parents when they tell you you're a little kid, they say, Mark, you're running with a bad crowd. We really don't like those friends that you're keeping, nowadays. That's what I would say to you, Mark. I'm just saying.
I can't figure out, David, the logic, because the same people that are telling me all those things and calling me names about this insane opinion that Ohio State could possibly be better still than Michigan were the same people that were saying that Michigan was better than TCU after they lost to them.
Can I just say, Mark, it's a wonder that an Ohio State team that in the last 20 years, if you rank this team up against the last 20 Ohio State teams, it'd probably rank like 18th or 19th. I just don't know how we could keep up with a team that has so many NFL draft picks. And it is basically 2019 LSU and 2001 Miami had a baby. I just don't know how we could keep up with a team that has so many future NFL Hall of Famers, that has so much talent, how we could play them on their field and only lose by 6 points on a last second interception, how we could lose to that team by how we could just keep it that close by 6 points against the team with, so much talent. Every player is a first round draft pick. Every player is going to be in the Hall of Fame, Mark. I just don't know how this just mediocre Ohio State team could play them and stay within 6 points. How could that happen, Mark? That team has so much talent, Mark. I just don't see that. Are you catching my hyperbole, Mark? Are you picking up on it? I'm just saying.
Yeah, I've said some of the same things.
I just don't know how. How could we do such a thing? How could we stay within 6 points on that team's field? With all their talent. It's 2019 LSU and 2001 Miami had a baby, Mark. They're that loaded. Just saying. I will say this, by the way. I want to give a shout out to my Washington team, who Mark Rogers told me in August I was crazy to pick as one of my playoff teams.
Crazy.
Mark, you had my doubts. When I told you,
I didn't say there's a big chasm between had doubts and said you were crazy.
Okay.
I picked Oregon to win the Pac-12 to start the season.
Right. And by the way, going into this game, like the rest of the general public, I can't believe that, by the way, this line was 9.5. Do you?
Yeah, I thought that was too high. Obviously it was too high.
I'm glad that I took it, by the way, so that was easy cash. I'm just trying to keep up with Mark Rogers and Steve Merrill's picks, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's awfully tough to do. But I would say this, my man, Michael Penix.
Yes.
I got to agree with our guy, Zach Smith, though. The hands down Heisman Trophy winner should be Jaden Daniels. If there's any justice in this world, Jaden Daniels should win the Heisman running away, Mark. Would you agree with that? Let's be fair here.
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that.
I
wouldn't disagree with it either. I'm so uninterested in the Heisman race. I really don't have much of an opinion, except for it should be either Nix, Penix, or Daniels. If I had a vote, I'd look into it and I would give it a lot of research and time. But as it stands, whatever. Give it.
The dude has like 800 touchdowns or something this year.
I'm okay with one of those. He is like one more touchdown than Bo Nix does.
Yeah, but did you see his numbers compared to like Cam Newton, Burrow, Bryce Young, like all the other SEC quarterbacks that have won Heismans?
Well, none of them compare to Burrow.
Well, Burrow is the ultimate. Yeah, right. But like combined 50 touchdowns the guy's got, Mark.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would go with Daniels as my choice. I don't think he's going to win it. Do you think Penix probably wrapped it up tonight?
I don't know why. He played okay. He played a good game.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't exceptional. So I don't know what the voters are saying. That's the answer that I give all the time when people ask me who's won the Heisman. I don't know what other people are voting. I don't know. I guarantee that like 80% of the people watching, and you certainly know much better. I never know who Vegas has ranked as the highest in the Heisman odds, or second or third. I have no idea. I could care less.
Okay.
Yeah. I've followed the trophy. I could tell you who's won every Heisman Trophy back to like 1962. So it's ingrained in my brain. And I used to watch the Heisman Trophy every year, and I used to care. I don't know at what point I stopped caring, but it's been quite a while ago. And I don't know when the last time I watched a Heisman Trophy presentation, probably 15 years ago.
Okay. All right. I mean, I just actually think Daniels deserves it. I mean, Penix. Well, here's the thing with Penix. Penix played on a really good football team. So are you going to take an undefeated team versus a 3-loss team? I think the record usually does play a role in it. That's where I was going with that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Well, I think it should, if not for the reason that you want a winning quarterback, a championship caliber quarterback. Although there can be a championship caliber quarterback placed on a bad team. But there is something to be said about a player that's playing high pressure games late in the season.
right.
Once Jaden Daniels lost to Alabama, his games became meaningless.
I did want to get into the games tomorrow. Let's take a
Sure.
look at it real quick. And I know, I don't want to keep you because I know you've been on here for a while, but early thoughts. I actually think Texas is going to handle Oklahoma State fairly easily. Oh, but by the way, Texas probably should have already lost a game or two. Although I think just because I just don't think much of Oklahoma State. I mean, what are your early thoughts on that one, Mark?
Yeah, Oklahoma State is just not an ultra talented team. I broke this game down with a Texas guy and Oklahoma State guy. They couldn't even give me a positional group where Oklahoma State has an advantage. For as much as the Oklahoma State guy is a super Oklahoma State fan, in addition to media, like I couldn't find a path for Oklahoma State to win this game. I don't think Texas is some kind of super team, but
No.
I think that they will be. I think they are playing better the last few weeks, and certainly 50-point win over Texas Tech. But yeah, if they play the way they did against TCU or against Houston or Kansas State, sure they can lose this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's my argument. By the way, Ohio State fans will know early on whether they have a shot at the playoffs. You'll probably figure it out by end of game time tomorrow between those two teams. So, I mean, but bottom line, I think Oklahoma State could hang in there. Maybe if they can run the ball a little bit, that might help. But and Texas does play down the competition, but I see Texas pulling away in the second half in that one.
What's a really bad matchup there is that Texas has one of the best rushing defenses in the country, and Oklahoma State needs to run the ball. Ollie Gordon is leading the nation in rushing yardage, and you cannot put a game on Alan Bowman's shoulders.
That's true. Yeah, I just think that yours, the skill player talent, will eventually overwhelm Oklahoma State. I think they'll pull away. To the SEC title game, Mark, I will say this. I just think that Georgia is rounding into form. And even though I think Alabama is really good, and I think Tommy Reese has built an offense that can work for Milroe. I like Bond. I like their defense a lot. I think their secondary is as good as anybody's in the country. What do you think? Do you think they have the best secondary in the country? Maybe Alabama.
Yeah, I think it's right up there. Those Michigan corners are really good, and Penn State's got a tremendous secondary. Yeah, they're right up there.
I put Ohio State if Lathan Ransom was healthy.
Yeah.
I think their secondary is very good. But yeah, I mean, I actually think that Alabama defense versus Texas versus Georgia's offense. But you know what though? Georgia can run the ball, and you know what? Beck has had a really good year, Mark. Really good year.
I know he has. He barely gets touched, at least recently.
I mean, I think Milton and Edwards running the ball. I think them having Bowers back, McConkey will make a few plays. I just think Georgia has a little bit too much balance. Plus, I don't think Alabama can run the football, can they, Mark?
Probably not on Georgia that well. And Jace McClellan got dinged up against Auburn last week.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much on Milroe, I think, to run the ball, be the dual threat quarterback. And, I just can't see him pulling a Bryce Young from 2 years ago and putting together an all-around kind of game like that.
Yeah, he's not the quarterback Bryce Young was.
No,
yet.
no. I like Georgia. I haven't seen Mark Rogers' picks. Maybe we all haven't seen Mark Rogers' picks. I don't know.
No, they have yet to be made.
Okay, but I'm
Yeah.
leaning Georgia. But I think that'll be a close one. You know, Saban has had Kirby's number in the Georgia Dome. So, to the evening affair, Mark. By the way, is the backup quarterback going to be out for Florida State against Louisville? Is that official, or where are they at? Are they going to be
It
down
is
to?
not official.
Okay,
We
that's going to be a
don't know.
game time decision.
It appears so.
So Florida State could legitimately be going into the ACC title game with their third string quarterback.
Yeah, it's been done.
What's your lean in that game, Mark?
It's a toss-up.
You think it's a toss-up, really?
Well, it's a 1.5-point game according to Vegas. Sounds like a toss-up to me.
Mark, you're smarter than Vegas. That's why I come to you for the knowledge. I've seen your picks.
Yeah. Well,
I've seen your picks, Mark. You're doing well.
I would not trust anything that's come out of my mouth in the last 2.5 hours because
okay.
Yeah, I'm just that's why I'm sitting here listening to you.
This hasn't been a good night for the Mark Rogers picks, I take it.
Well, I haven't had any picks tonight. There haven't been any games played, so.
Oh, you didn't do any action
I don't have any issue with my picks today.
On Oregon, Washington, you had nothing?
Well, I picked Oregon to win the game. Yeah.
Okay. But you would have taken Washington getting the 9.5, though, right?
I didn't make a call on that, so did not make an official pick.
Okay.
There.
By the way, I think Florida State has, even with the third string quarterback, probably the more overall talented team. It's just a third string quarterback that leads me to think that, although, you know, Louisville losing to Kentucky last week, I mean, come on.
I don't think that has any bearing on this game whatsoever. I think we've seen that way too many times. Teams win games, lose games, come out different the next week. Yeah. Oklahoma State lost to UCF by 42 points just a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Texas could have lost to pick your team in the Big 12.
Yeah, if Kansas State could make a 20-some yard field goal, right, Mark?
If the officials could spot the ball against Houston.
Yeah. I mean, that's what kind of gives me hope tomorrow. Although, you know, like you said, Oklahoma State gets trounced by, you know, a scrub and, you know.
Yep.
So, all right. Hey, you doing a call-in show tomorrow? And by the way, you're going to do the playoff call-in show on Sunday, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, we'll be here.
We'll get some new clothes. Maybe something in red, Mark. That would be better. You know, better look for you. So,
we'll give it a thought.
Okay. Get
Thanks,
some
David.
sleep too, Mark.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care. Yep. See you, man.
All right. My eyes at this point are about to be poked out. So my prescription would not be happy with me being like 2 hours and plus minutes past my drops that are supposed to go into my left eye. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Instant analysis all day tomorrow. We will see you then.